This is everything you need to know about the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, every theory we've had, all the lore we've spotted, and all the Easter eggs hinting at a bigger story. Also, you're prepared to watch FNAF 2. Just make sure you don't lose your head. Hello Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that will just always come back. So at this point, Five Nights at Freddy's needs a little introduction. This franchise and Team Theorist are so intertwined at this point that our forefather and founder MatPat is literally in these movies.
It's just a theory.
And as more than just a cameo in the upcoming sequel.
Mr. MatPat himself and getting to be the voice of
Yeah, in a crazy bit of news, Matt is actually joining the movie as one of the main animatronics, lending his voice to Toy Bonnie, something that the internet has really just taken and run with.
And then I open up Double Stuff and I'm like, oh, look at that thick layer of cream in there. I want that thickness inside my
Just absolute perfection with this one, man. Also, fun fact, but Matt, the traitor, did not tell me that he actually got this part, so it was just as much a surprise for me and the rest of the team as it was for you. Stupid non-disclosure agreements. Anyway, we've theorized a lot about these movies over the years. Our very first FNAF movie theory was actually the very first script I wrote completely solo because Matt knew what happened in the movie and thought it wouldn't be fair for him to theorize about it himself. So it holds a special place in my heart, you know? And with the new movie coming out so soon, I wanted to do something a little bit special here. I wanted to collect all of our theories into one place for your convenience, so you are prepared with all of our thoughts and knowledge before we head into the sequel. Oh, and we're also adding a special little surprise from another channel in the Theorist family that you might have missed back in the day, but trust me, you'll be eating well. But hey, that's enough of me yapping. Let's get into everything you need to know about the FNAF movie before FNAF 2.
Finally it's happened. After 8 agonizingly long years in development hell, hopping from studio to studio, director to director, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is finally out for you to go see right now. And man, has this been a commercial hit. As of the writing of this script, just one weekend into release, the movie's made over $152 million at the box office, more than 7 times its own budget. And that's despite being available to stream on Peacock, where, oh wait, it's also the most viewed movie on Peacock ever. Suck on that, my big fat Greek wedding 3. It's also Blumhouse's most successful opening weekend to date, which means that more people are turning out to see Springtrap wielding his knife than Michael Myers. Maybe now Hollywood will finally bother to get the name of this thing right.
And his other movie, Friday Nights at Freddy's, comes to theaters and streaming on Peacock October 27th.
Five Nights at Freddy's.
What did I say?
Friday nights. It's been 8 or 9 years since I first met Scott Cawthorn, who created this.
Why do we get it
Five
wrong?
nights.
Or not. Who cares? Forget them. This thing was made for the fans. From Sparky the Dog to Dream Theory to...
It's just a theory.
You bet it is, and today we're getting back to those theorist roots. Today we're theorizing about the actual movie, and boy, is there a lot to talk about here. True story, after the movie, I basically locked myself in the room with Lee and Tom, the film and game theory creative directors, and we busted out our trusty whiteboard to figure out exactly what was going on in the movie and where the story was gonna head in the future, because there were just a lot of details left hanging. What was up with the Balloon Boy figurine? How's no one freaked out by the fact that there are bodies in those animatronics? Wasn't this like the most structurally unsound table for it of all time? That last one, perhaps the biggest mystery of them all. Today, we're gonna be looking at all the Easter eggs, secrets, and hidden lore from the movie, then comparing those to other parts of the franchise, both the books and the games, in order to predict where the story of the FNAF 2 movie is gonna go years before they actually make it. So to begin, we should point out that we already do have some vague idea where the sequel's gonna head. In an interview with Variety, FNAF director Emma Tammy explained that the first movie was tied to the first game, so a second film would likely tie into a second game, which, kinda goes without saying, but also should probably make our lives easy, right? Yeah, not quite. As we mentioned in our first prediction theory, the strategy for the movieverse seems to be taking iconic bits and pieces from across the entire franchise, games, books, fan theories, even hoaxes, and distilling it all down into the most recognizable version of FNAF there is. That's how we got Mike Schmidt from FNAF 1 hanging out with Vanessa from Security Breach, fighting Springtrap from FNAF 3, and saving Abby from getting stuck into a Springlock version of Ella from the Silver Eyes novel, with an ending that was ripped straight out of the 4th closet. It is literally FNAF the smoothie. Everything dumped into a blender, chopped up, and then poured back out onto the big screen. So yeah, while it did follow the same broad strokes as the first game, Five Nights in the FNAF 1 pizzeria with ghost kids in suits, it is definitely not the same story. It's also important to note the changes to the story that have been added in. One example has to be the time that these movies take place. It's widely accepted that the FNAF 1 video game takes place somewhere around 1993, and yet in this scene from the movie, we see a date on a security camera that reads April 6th, 2000, about 7 years later. Another big example, though we've long theorized that the story of the original FNAF games takes place in Utah, that is not the case in the film. In the film, during the scene where Aunt Jane is confronting Mike at Abby's school, her lawyer hands Mike some family court paperwork. If you pause and read the fine print on the documents, you'll find the URL mncourts.gov, which is the official website for the Minnesota judicial system. Additionally, we can see a phone number with the area code 651, which is connected to the St. Paul area and eastern suburbs of Minnesota. And get this, I kid you not, there's a small town in this area code named Afton. You cannot make that up. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Scott moved the entire movie to Minnesota just for that change alone. Lastly, there's also this decal on Vanessa's police cruiser, GFPD. PD stands for police department. That part's pretty darn obvious, but then what about the GF? Well, honestly, that could stand for any city or township with those same initials, from Grand Forks to Glen Falls to Great Falls, but included in that list is Granite Falls, just 2 hours west of St. Paul, whose cop cars, at least according to the website, follow the exact same black and white color pattern that we see in the movie. Speaking of clues from the cars that are seen throughout the movie, we can also reasonably assume that Mike's brother Garrett was kidnapped in the early 80s, based on this shot from Mike's dream sequence. By taking the rear end of William Afton's car here and reverse image searching for it, we're able to identify this as a Ford Fairmont Futura. Specifically, the model is coming from between 1980 and 1983. You can immediately see the connections here between the unique vertical taillight design and the boxy body shape. But why then does that matter? Well, Mike's brother Garrett is likely the first child that Afton abducted and killed. In Mike's dream flashbacks, we very clearly see Garrett holding a toy airplane as he's being taken away in the back of Afton's car. And where do we see that airplane again? When Vanessa reveals Afton to be her father. She's holding the same airplane. That right there, that is cold. Gifting toys from your victims to your daughter. But not only is it gross, it's also helpful because it lets us put together a rough timeline. You see, Afton and Vanessa are clearly in a still operational pizzeria in this photograph, which means it had to have been taken before the other kids went missing, causing Freddy's to shut down. In other words, Garrett was the first of Afton's victims that we currently know of. And that right there, that's important because in the games, Afton's first victim, and the one most closely associated with his car, goes on to possess the puppet, a marionette-esque character that serves as a protector and guide to all the other spirit children. It's the first victim that gives gifts and gives life to the other animatronics after their murders. We see this possession happening in FNAF 6's security puppet minigame. Notice the tire tracks out there in the rain. We see the exact same event from a different angle in FNAF 2. Notice that cool purple car. From there, the rest of FNAF 2's hidden minigames then show us the puppet trying to protect the other dead children from Afton. And when it can't, the puppet decides to bring them to life in the form of animatronics. The robotic voice here is spelling out save them. Does it sound familiar? It should. That same robotic voice appears at the very end of the movie's credits.
COMEFINDME.
Once the whole thing wraps, the voice has spelled out, "Come find me," in the exact same way that the puppet communicated to the player in the FNAF 2 minigames. And who needs to be found in the movie? Garrett. See, the fact that they never resolved what exactly happened to Garrett was a big thing that stuck out to me when I was watching this thing. After all, it was Mike's entire motivation and his only clear outright connection to both Afton and Vanessa. His fate is definitely going to come up again in the sequel, and all the signs are pointing to the puppet from the FNAF 2 video game. What's more, did you notice the music that was playing during that section? It's a music box. Another nod to the puppet, who in the games is kept calm by constantly winding a music box. In short, Garrett is possessing the puppet in this world, and here he is literally trying to tell Mike and the audience to come find him in the sequel. But stop for a minute and consider the method of Afton's crime here. It is different from all the rest. He's out in nature. He kidnaps Garrett and presumably leaves him alive longer than his normal victims. He keeps the kid's toy and then gives it to his daughter. They're even in a completely different state. Unlike the rest of Afton's crimes, where he just lures kids to the back of the pizzeria and kills them, here, things feel premeditated. They feel personal. And that would align with both the games and the books, where Afton's first murder isn't just a random killing, it's targeted against one person, his business partner and the original builder of the animatronics, Henry.
Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this.
In fact, in the novel trilogy, Afton does the exact same thing that he does in the movie. He kidnaps Henry's daughter Charlie before ultimately killing her. Basically, all signs point to Garrett not just being a random victim, but rather to him being the son of Afton's partner and rival Henry, the man who helped Afton build all of the animatronics. See, as I was piecing together the details from the movie, I started to notice something. The Afton and Schmidt families from the movie seem awfully close to the family structures from the games, except in reverse. You see, in the game series, we know that Afton has himself 3 children, Michael, Crying Child, and Elizabeth. The oldest son, Michael, plays a prank as a kid which gets his younger brother killed in the iconic Bite of 1983. From there on, Mike becomes obsessed with atoning for his mistake, eventually becoming a security guard and releasing the spirit of his brother into the afterlife. Then there's Elizabeth, who eventually gets trapped and dies inside a baby, a suit that is increasingly looking to be a spring-lock animatronic. Now let's check out the Schmidt family over in the movie. You have, again, a family of 3, 2 boys and a girl. Mike, the older brother, is a security guard who's obsessed with atoning for the time that he got his younger brother Garrett kidnapped and killed. Then there's Abby, who's nearly trapped and killed inside the Ella suit, a spring-lock animatronic. They literally match 1 for 1. Meanwhile, Afton in the movie seems to have himself only 1 daughter, Vanessa, just like Henry had himself 1 daughter, Charlie, in the games. So if they've switched dynamics, that could make Mike's dad here the representative of Henry Emily from the games.
Her mom died a little while back, and Dad, he couldn't handle it, so...
They leave Mike's dad's fate vague. To me, looks like it was deliberately done in case they ever wanted to bring Mike's dad back into the story in a role similar to Henry's. But perhaps most interesting of all, if you look in the background of the employee training video, you can see a man who looks very similar to Mike's dad working on the animatronics, just like Henry would have done in the game's canon. This is also, as far as I can tell, an uncredited performance, but one look at Mike's dad, this guy from the training video, and the way that Henry's portrayed in places like the character encyclopedia, it shows a visual design connection between the 3 of them. But not only would this connection fit with the established game lore, it would also explain why William Afton recognizes Mike. Early in the movie, we see Afton have a moment of recognition when he reads Mike's last name,
Mr. Michael.
But according to US Census data, there's around 166,000 people with the last name Schmidt here in the US. So either this is just a case of pure movie coincidence, or William recognizes not only the last name Schmidt, but Mike Schmidt specifically, in the general age range that his partner's son would be. That's why he's so sure that this is someone from his past. More evidence for this? The fact that William knows that Mike has a brother without it ever being addressed.
This is perfect. First I killed your brother, now I killed you.
Sure, we can assume the spirit children told him.
Little ones tell me you have a sister.
Or maybe Vanessa, but that's a bit less satisfying than him just knowing and taking out his vendetta against every member of the Schmidt family. And for those of you saying that Henry's last name is Emily, it might be, but that's never actually been officially confirmed. We've always thought it was a bit bizarre to have as a last name, and let's be honest, it could just as easily be Charlie's middle name, Charlotte Emily Schmidt. But last, let's talk about William. You'll notice that I just pulled the line that indicates that the spirits talk to William throughout this movie, which is a very important detail. In fact, if you notice, they really gave Afton a lot of explicit control over what the spirits are doing here. See, while he seems to understand what was happening in the games, it never seemed like he could outright control the animatronics. In the books, it's a little bit different. He eventually is able to control the animatronics, but not until the last novel of the trilogy. Here, though, he seems to understand all of it from the get-go. They tell him about Abby. He understands the importance of the pictures on the wall.
What have you done?
And as the spring locks in his suit are going off and he's dying, what does he do? He basically looks directly in the camera, says his catchphrase,
I always come back.
and puts on the Springtrap helmet. Why? What sense would that make? Well, it's a pretty clear indication that this Afton explicitly knows how possession works, and it involves being completely put inside of the suit like this. Putting on that helmet is basically Afton accepting his fate, knowing that he'll be back, able to possess the suit and survive. So right here we have ourselves a smarter Afton who is years further in his understanding of the spiritual world than either the Afton in the games or the books. Which leads me to this, an animatronic buried in the parts and service room of the pizzeria. One that you can't see in the movie, but you can see in the behind the scenes footage from Dawko during his tour of the movie set. An animatronic with rounded human skull, silver eyes, and human teeth. While this could just be background set dressing, I don't think that's the case. If this is truly an Afton who understands the power of agony in granting eternal life, if this is an Afton who has gone so far as to build a Freddy torture chair for extracting remnant from his victims, I'm thinking his experiments with building passable robotic humans has already begun. This isn't just me playing the Robot Gregory game again, it is the only explanation for the parts and services room to have an animatronic with human teeth and realistic human head proportions and eyes. And above it, hanging from the top of the shop, a robotic hand with 5 fully articulating fingers and human proportions. No other animatronic in this series fits this sort of description. Does this mean he's already built a humanoid, or is this just an early phase of his experiments? It's unclear, but it does give a bit more credit to Vanessa's bloodless stab wound at the end of the movie being more than just an excuse to get itself a PG-13 rating. My real guess, though, is that there's a robot Garrett walking around, and that he'll be the reveal at the end of the movie, just like Charlie the puppet is revealed to be a robot at the end of the 4th closet. A world-shattering revelation for Mike as he comes to terms with the nature of his brother and his father's weird creations, before the final movie where he's tasked with having to burn it all down. Honestly, the pieces are in place for us. Or not. All the next movie has to do is drop a Markiplier cameo and then show me a clip of Mangle, and I'm in.
So, my secret's out. I can finally be honest with you. I'm in the FNAF movie! Oh, and it's been a year! And not only was I in the FNAF movie, my scene was the first scene shot of the entire production. Day 1, scene 1, I was there. I also got to meet Scott Cawthon after 8 years of us dancing around each other for the first time in person. But you know what? We're gonna get to all that. First and most importantly, I just need to apologize. I'm sorry that I had to lie to you for the better part of the last year to make it seem like I wasn't a part of this whole thing. I'm sorry that there were so many of you that were convinced that I wasn't in it and were mad at the production on my behalf. Trust me, I would have been mad at the production too if I had thought the same thing. I never wanted to cause any sort of stress or anxiety or bad feelings to any one of you out there, and honestly, for what it's worth, I cannot tell you how wonderful it was for me to see so many of you up in arms defending my right to be a part of this thing. I see each of you, and I appreciate what you guys were doing. Seriously, it meant the world to see so many of you care and defend me like that. It was awesome. I just hope that the surprise of me walking out on stage and being revealed to be in this thing was worth all the fake out. And let me be clear, at the end of the day, no one from the movie once gave me any sort of instructions on how to handle this whole situation. No one swore me to secrecy, there was no paperwork, there were no explicit instructions on what I could and couldn't say. It was all kind of implied. Everything else was just kind of on me. But I also knew that if I didn't cover the movie or do like live reactions to the trailers on GT Live, things like that, that you all would probably figure it out. You would sense that something was off about our content calendar, that I was hiding something from you, and in turn, that would just ruin the production secret. And let me tell you, I did not expect them to make my life so incredibly difficult, especially when they started throwing YouTuber cameos into the trailers themselves. Thanks for that one there, guys. Is that Dawko? No, are you kidding me?
Where to?
Are you kidding me? Fun fact, by the way, they actually had me read for that role literally a week before their filming started. So there I was, awkwardly in my basement at midnight on a Friday with Steph filming me reacting to a giant robot bear in the imaginary backseat of my invisible taxi cab.
No! Oh! Not cool, man! Not cool.
Oh, and also, in case you were wondering, actually being in the movie kind of made making theories predicting what was going to be in the movie a bit tricky. I had the whole script, and so basically, unless they rewrote the whole thing, I knew basically all the major story beats. It kind of felt like I would be cheating somehow or spoiling the movie in advance unfairly. So instead, that film theory prediction of the movie was one of the few times where I actually took a complete step back from the channel and was almost entirely leaving the script in someone else's hands, letting Film Theory's creative director Lee handle all the heavy lifting based on information that was available via the trailers. And I gotta say, I was surprised with just how much he got right, and also some of the things that he missed, but you know what? That's a theory for another day.
Anyway, so yeah, almost exactly 1 year ago, all the way back in November of 2022, I was contacted by Blumhouse to be a part of the movie, or Bad Cupcake, as they were calling it back then. It was the secret code name so no one discovered what it was. A week before flying out, they were still shuffling me around to see what my part would be, and on February 1st, day 1, scene 1, I was in New Orleans to film this thing. Hey there. Welcome to Sparky's. Okay, but let's get real. The whole actor thing is kind of crazy. They're like, no, we will bring the stuff to you, and oh, you can stay in your trailer. I'm like, it's okay. I can go get my own food. They're like, no, but you're the actor. One thing off the bat that I didn't expect was actually the scale of this thing, because it was massive. And you're probably thinking, well, no duh, Matt, it was a movie, but I guess that never really registered with me. I mean, I've done professional theater before. I've done things like big Mr. Beast shoots where he takes over entire football stadiums. How different could this actually be? Well, It was different. It was huge. I have never seen anything this size before. The number of people, the coordination. I had a costume fitting the day before, and for my dinky little cameo of 3 lines in this movie, I kid you not, they had me try on 20 different combinations of outfits, all of which had to then be run by the director and Scott for their approval. I mean, an entire floor of a building was just full wall to wall of clothing, hundreds and hundreds of outfits. Mike alone had practically an entire wall all to himself. It was actually there that I got to see who else was gonna be a part of this movie up on the wall. That's where I actually learned that Corey was gonna be a cab driver for the first time. It was also where I saw that good old Markiplier was supposed to be the security guard who gets killed at the very beginning of the movie. But probably most importantly of all, it's there that I also saw the withered, dabbing Chica posted on the wall, like some sort of guardian angel over the production. Basically, I was just doing the whole theorist thing by trying to pick up as many small details and Easter eggs as I could in what few moments I had left unsupervised. Funny enough, it turns out the production staff were trying to do the exact same thing right back at me. From the moment I stepped into my first costume fitting, people started to grill me about FNAF. It's no joke. Apparently, they had been briefed that I was someone who had studied the franchise a lot, and so I was getting inundated with all sorts of questions about the type of person that Mike is, or how I saw William Afton in my mind's eye, or whether I could give them information about characters like Abby. I honestly think it was them trying to get a feel for whether they were on the right track with all of this, how the community as fans might respond to all of this world that they'd created, which honestly is pretty cool. The same thing happened the next day when we were on location at the shoot, where all the other actors in my scene between setups would take time to ask me about how their characters behaved in the games, how their role fit into the overarching narrative of the franchise, which I gotta say was kind of a bummer because all the characters in my scene were just made up for the movie. So didn't have a whole lot of detail to impart on them. So instead of all that, Heather Stewart Masterson, she's Aunt Jane in the movie, she just ended up asking me a lot of questions about the parallels between Abby and Baby from the game, since that's the one that her character is probably most focused on. In general though, it was clear that across the board, everyone was so eager to do the franchise justice. They wanted to know as much as they could. They wanted to learn. They wanted to absorb all that information, and they were proud to be a part of a project and being able to show it off. The only sad part of it all was that I was so early in this process, most of the stuff wasn't even ready for me to see yet. They really wanted to show me the pizzeria, but schedule-wise, the first month of production was dedicated to everything happening outside of the pizzeria, meaning that the set, it was still being built. It was still in process. So when they took me to see it, I just got a lot of blank walls. And don't get me wrong, they were impressive blank walls. Very big, very majestic blank walls, but still, left a lot to the imagination. Same thing kind of happened when they showed me the animatronics. Everything was still locked away because it needed final testing, so the most I got was like a little peek through a sliver in the wall. It's awesome. I think I could make out the murder mask. I'm like, what's up with that weird Freddy head? And they're like, I don't know, creative decision. But come to think of it, it actually kind of worked out really well, because when it came time to react to the trailers when they were being uploaded to YouTube, I didn't have to fake anything, because it was truly my first time getting to see all of this thing finished. Sure, I knew the storyline of the movie. I had the whole script in my hands, and I knew what part I played in this whole thing, but seeing it all, actually getting to experience how it all worked together, it was my first time. No fake reactions here, my friends. And to be honest, seeing it on camera doesn't do the scale of this whole thing justice. I cannot stress to you how massive this production was. They literally built an entire restaurant inside of an old abandoned Home Depot in New Orleans. Hallways, rooms, it was a complete restaurant, which was just mind-blowing to me. Most movies would probably try to do some clever camera tricks or green screening or something, but no, they built an entire building from the ground up inside of another building. It was crazy. As far as my role in all of this, I had a one-day shoot, and that actual day I had to wake up at 4 a.m. and then find a car that had been left for me in a random parking garage the night before. Inside the car were explicit driving instructions to a secret location. Really felt like something straight out of a spy movie. From there, I drove an hour out of town to a random diner that had been shut down due to COVID. Once we were on location, they actually gave me my own trailer. They told me that's not the sort of thing that a day player would normally get, but they wanted to give us YouTubers the star treatment, which I gotta say was just like incredibly generous of them. That's right. Got 3 lines, baby. That's what I get. It's nice. That's where I'm gonna be hanging out. That's where the next 2 episodes of Game Theory are gonna be written, probably. Inside my trailer, I found this guy right here. Little rubber chicken head, little pencil topper. He was in one of the drawers, and so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna work him into my character. And so if you see him in the movie, that's it. A little Easter egg for you. And from there, it was on to set, where for the next 8 hours, we were working on a single scene. Now, one diner scene. You heard that right. 8 straight hours. One thing. Why so long? They had the cameras set up outside. Then they had to move the cameras inside. Then they had to have the specialty close-up cameras. Then they had to remove half the booth to capture one side of a conversation, then remove the other half of the booth, replace the other half of the booth to capture the other side of the conversation. Then they had to remove the booth entirely so they could put cameras right here and capture a close-up of my face. There were B-rolls of different tables getting served. There were B-rolls and specialty shots of dishes getting served up at the window. It was a lot for what ultimately amounts in the movie to be like 3 minutes of footage. As you might imagine, we all started to get a bit creative with how we were filling our time with each take.
What are you doing?
I'm filming this for eventually when I do the like, hey, I was in this movie and it's behind the scenes.
Oh my goodness.
Wow, so no pressure. Hey.
The lengthy time between takes as they moved cameras along also gave me plenty of chances to explore the set for any hints of lore. And I actually found a lot of really fun details buried in the walls. Like, here's one time where I found the fake diner's registration information. Here's another one where I found a QR code that I was almost convinced was trying to be a start of some new ARG. Then I learned that it wasn't. At which point, I decided to call that detail out to the production team as being anachronistic since this was meant to be set at a time before QR codes became mainstream, and then they promptly took it down. So, TLDR of this entire video, I single-handedly saved the FNAF movie. By the way, on the subject of small details, I don't know if you noticed it in the movie, but the diner I work in is called Sparky's Diner, which is a reference to one of the earliest urban legends from the first FNAF game, that there was this dog animatronic named Sparky hidden somewhere inside. The movie is actually full of these sorts of Easter eggs. For instance, my character's official name, right here, it's Ness. I don't know if you'd noticed this one in the movie, but it's Ness. And I was told by everyone that Scott specifically called out that he needed me to be named Ness. At first, I immediately thought like, oh, this gotta be a reference to Ness from FNAF AR. Or maybe this is another instance of Vanessa from Security Breach. You know, just Scott trolling people by using the same name over and over again. But no, when I met him later in the day, he told me it was a reference to Sans' Ness. He was very proud of himself. Speaking of, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Scott Cawthon. The whole time, it was unclear whether Scott would actually be there on set. It was one of those things that people were like, we don't know if Scott's gonna be there. He might show up. We asked him if he's gonna show up on the first day. I thought that was a little bit weird. I mean, it's your first day of shooting your movie that's been like 5+ years in the making. I don't know, you'd think that you'd try to make an appearance there or something, right? Well, he did, but apparently it was a big surprise. He flew in special for that day. It was interesting. Most of the production crew didn't know who he was. They just knew him as the VIP on set, who everyone had to listen to if he asked them to do something, but no one actually understood what he was, that he was the creator of the game. I think ultimately it winds up being a movie thing, you know, where he's just responsible for talking to the director, who's then the one who's executing on his creative vision. So a lot of the rest of the day-to-day staff don't really need to know that this is the man that gave them a reason to be there in the first place. But yeah, I got to meet him. It was great. He has a good, strong handshake, and he looks you in the eye when you talk, which is always the sign of an upstanding person. He was wearing a classic Zelda t-shirt, which big props to that one. And he was doing a great job, honestly, of directing everyone. I overheard him consulting some of the costume department and clearly outlining his vision of what everyone should be wearing, which was really cool. I think most people would probably have been intimidated by this massive production, all leaning on him, but it was just really impressive to watch. He made sure that I knew about the whole Ness joke and also about how he gave the waiter role bonus lines. In fact, he was so proud of that one line that he asked me to go over the top with it like I do in the videos as part of the scene, and I did it for one take, and it was weird, especially with everyone else in the scene taking the scene so seriously, and so we all decided to keep it a bit more toned down. He took off before I left for the day, and I said, I'll see you again at the premiere. And, well, there's no premiere, so I guess that's the last time I'm ever gonna see him. Oh, and no, to answer your obvious question, we did not talk about lore. We both swore that one off. Instead, we talked about the community and how we both expected the community to take this particular script. In the end, he was just really grateful for me being able to be a part of the movie. And that was mind-blowing to me, because I'm like, are you kidding? I was the one who was lucky. I got to be in this mainstream movie. How cool is that? Growing up, acting was one of my dreams. To be a performer horror, that was always like the end goal for me for like the first 18 years of my life. And since then, that goal's obviously changed a lot. I've moved on, I've done something honestly that I'm more proud of here, where I'm able to make a business and perform as myself instead of as a character. But this was, in a lot of ways, a realization of that dream that baby MatPat had nearly a decade ago. I actually recorded a bit of my thoughts as I was getting ready to leave the set. It felt important to document.
And that's a wrap.
I was there. I was in it. Kinda sad.
But it was cool to see a childhood dream in some ways get realized.
It was kind of like I got a peek into a multiverse of another life of mine. And then that was it. Back home, like nothing had ever happened. I did keep the pencil topper and the name tag as souvenirs though, so yes, I did steal from the set of FNAF the movie. For 2 days, this was just a small window into something that was so big. I got to be a visitor in this massive machine that I hopped off of, and then that just continued on without me. But man, let me tell you, it is surreal to see posters going up in theaters of a movie that you're in. Oh, and can I level with you for a second? This whole thing, it was so intimidating. You know how I keep doing videos this year about being in the PGA Tour or producing a Broadway show, and how the theme of the year happens to be like, say yes and to your life? Well, this was actually the first of those things because it was at the top of the year. This was the thing that got me started on the whole theme, because it is one thing to speak as yourself on a couch about things that you know, and it is something entirely different to walk in as a complete noob and say scripted lines as a random character named after a meme to a crew of seasoned actors while they're stopping public traffic outside and 50 production staff are slowly zooming a camera into your face. I mean, I've done a lot of performances, but this was just at another level. The only thing that I asked the director, Emma, to make sure of was that I didn't deliver some sort of like cringy YouTuber performance. You know what I mean. It can't not be cringy when you're saying your like own catchphrase. That's kind of silly. But you know, I didn't want to bring the movie down. And to be honest, I think I did all right. Anyway, that right there, my friends, that is my story, and it feels so good. So good to finally come clean about it. I have wanted to bring you in as a part of this journey for the longest time. In the end, I cannot thank the team there enough for all their incredible generosity and their patience. And Scott, thank you for giving me the chance to be a part of this. But most importantly, thank you. This whole thing, this is our collective victory, right? Because without you supporting me or supporting these channels and supporting these wacky theories, none of this would have been possible. And if you haven't seen the movie, then what the heck are you waiting for? Watch it and then go watch it again. Show them the force of Team Internet so that the late night hosts and the executive producers finally learn that things from the internet deserve to be pronounced correctly. Anyway, in the end, who knows? Maybe there'll be room in the sequel for the return of a well-meaning, cringy waiter with a love of breakfast and a meme-ish name. But until then, remember, that's not a theory. It's just a video. Video for you.
Friends, it feels like some sort of cruel joke. The Five Nights at Freddy's movie came and went from theaters. It was fun. It did great financially, and we all had ourselves a grand old time. We moved on, and now we wait patiently for the next installment to drop, where Mike seeks help for a sleeping disorder, and Freddy and friends take their fort-building business on the road to turn it into a major real estate venture. Everything was in balance, as it should be. And yet, they couldn't just leave well enough alone, could they? Because just like clockwork for this franchise, they turned the movie into a book. A book! Even though I announced my final episodes, I still couldn't get out of this thing fast enough, could I? Even though all the book releases were technically done for the franchise, after 22 solid books, and that's not even including the graphic novels and all the other spin-off materials, good old Scotty Cawthon found a way to squeeze one more in on me before my foot was out the door. And you know what I did? I read the thing. And I gotta say, I'm glad that I did, because let me tell you, it is a theorist gold mine. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today to tell you that the FNAF movie book, that the FNAF movie book, I can't even say it. It physically makes me ill to acknowledge that something like this exists. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand here today to tell you that the book version of the FNAF movie, it tells us everything about where the film spin-off series is headed to next. And perhaps more importantly than anything, it tells us that the big reveal of Chapter 3 is gonna be that Vanessa is a robot. Yeah, I know. You may now commence throwing things angrily at your computer monitor. So while you're busy getting yourself an angry arm workout, what am I talking about exactly? Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's not uncommon for films to get themselves what are known as movie novelizations. Basically a book that retells the exact same story as a movie, but because it's a book, there tend to be additional details thrown in to bulk things out. Insight into characters, their thoughts, their motivations, more descriptions of scenes, things like that. As you might imagine, novelizations like these were really popular before home video because people didn't have a way to relive the theater experience at their house. Nowadays, though, it's more of an additional source of found revenue for a movie. You already got yourself a script written after all, so you might as well throw in a few thousand extra words, slap a cover on it, probably just recycle some old promotional artwork, and boom! You just made yourself a couple extra bucks from the hardcore fans and the collectors. So of course, when the FNAF movie got itself one, I was legally bound to read through it with the hope and expectation that there might be some juicy lore hidden inside of its pages. And let me tell you, I was not disappointed. It was like experiencing the movie through some sort of weird multiverse. For instance, I am actually in the book. Well, Ness, my character from the movie. The catchphrase is in there and everything. It is really cool. I'm described as a, quote, tall, lanky, auburn-haired teen. I appreciate that book. You know what they say, the camera adds 10 pounds, but the novelization removes 20 years. That said, on the subject of learning more lore, apparently, and I didn't even know this is the guy who was playing the character, Ness is supposedly the son of the diner's owner, whose name is, in fact, Sparky. And that right there, that's a pretty interesting detail when you consider that there's a dog animatronic who we've all been assuming is Sparky hidden in the back of Freddy's pizzeria. It is a super unusual detail that gets just a little bit more explanation and a bit more insight, all thanks to the novel. So, I'm the son of a fake animatronic dog. File that one in my character bio right alongside my undying love for Doug the lawyer. Or maybe not. You see, Doug in the books, he is a very different character. The diner scene straight up features him openly creeping on Maxine, enough so that she thinks of him as a total sleazeball. Let's just say that he's hungry for more than just the apps. Thankfully, this is one of the precious few times that Scott Cawthon has stepped in to set the record straight, explaining that this gross version of my best shipmate is in fact non-canon, and that this scene will be altered in all future printings of the novelization. In short, Nug lives on. Or would you consider us Des? Anyway, you can already see how having more words on the page gives you tons of additional context to what you're seeing on the screen, and likely more insight into the original intent of these sorts of moments. And as you might imagine, if small bit players like Doug and I are getting lore drops from the books, then the main characters are also getting a lot of extra info in there as well. For instance, in the movie, it was lightly implied that Maxine had a bit of a crush on Mike. I picked it up right here, where she subtly signals that she wants him to put a ring on it.
I wish someone would buy me a ring.
It's not a big plot point, but you can tell that there's a bit more under the surface of this interaction. In the book, though, it goes from subtle subtext into a full-on plot point. She constantly dresses up for Mike, dropping tons of hints about her interest, growing more and more frustrated with Mike as he's completely oblivious to her advances. In fact, it's actually part of her motivation for spying on him for Aunt Jane, which she also feels very regretful for in the books, unlike the film where she just kind of looks sad out of a window for a bit. Another huge detail about the main characters, Mike is more of a theorist in the book than he was in the film, actively taking on more of the responsibility for unraveling the mystery. He independently does research. He even discovers the missing children's incident by himself instead of just being told about it by Vanessa later on in the film. I guess they just had to remove that part of the character from the film lest he get compared to the performances coming from other established theorists in the community. Okay, so that's obviously a bunch of random observations and details, adding a bit more texture to these characters that either got cut for time or glossed over in a more visual storytelling medium. But there is so much more packed into this book, enough so that I believe that we can figure out exactly where the story of the next 2 movies is headed. And it all begins with the hill that apparently I'm gonna be dying on for my final FNAF theories, a human being a robot. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Literally. I'm not the one making up the story here, friends. I just interpret the clues as best I can. But in this case, we don't have ourselves a robot boy. Instead, we have ourselves a robot cop, Vanessa. Vanessa is a robot, and I suspect she's not gonna be the only one. Now, obviously that is a huge claim to make, so let's start backing it up, shall we? Last time we talked about how Film Afton seems to be much further along in his understanding of the possessed animatronics than either his game or book counterparts. For instance, he knows that they operate based off the pictures that are hung on the wall.
What have you done?
He knows that, as he's dying, he needs to be wearing the golden bodysuit in order for his soul to survive by bonding to the metal.
I always come back.
He even seems to have a rudimentary understanding of Remnant based on the existence of that weird torture Freddy mask. I mean, seriously, these animatronics are not inventing a device like this. It has to have been man-made. In fact, the novelized version of the movie's Cold Open suggests exactly this. If you read the prologue of the book very closely, you learn that Bob, the security guard whose death opens the film, had already figured out that he was nothing more than a lamb for the slaughter in this job. First, his internal monologue acknowledges that he had been hired to guard the pizzeria. It's written expressly in sarcastic scare quotes there, showing that he knows very well that the job was never meant meant to be real. And as he's being dragged to his death by the animatronics, he passes by the kid's drawing of Afton holding the kid's hands. And we read that bile fills his throat in this moment. He knows that that picture, and the rabbit specifically, is the reason that he's currently fighting for his life. In short, the extra details in the prologue of the novelization strongly suggest that Afton is actively hiring guards to this pizzeria to harvest a remnant from them so he can continue on with his experiments. And he's using his control over the animatronics to help make all of this happen. And because of that, despite this being an adaptation of one of the earliest FNAF stories, Film Afton is likely already tinkering with much more advanced animatronic technology. Again, look no further than the cold open of the novel. The torture Freddy mask isn't just an old repurposed Freddy head like it is in the movie. Instead, it's described like this. Quote, "The two halves of the bear face peeled back like the wings of a beetle, expanding outward. As the fur parted, spinning robotic mechanisms filled Bob's vision." This description of how the mask operates, with pieces that split apart and fold out, is actually much more fitting of a different generation of animatronic, the Funtime animatronics. And what do we see in FNAF 5? The game where these Funtimes take center stage? Down in Afton's bunker, we see articulating humanoid robot heads, eyes constantly blinking. They're alive, and they're watching us. And these aren't just set decorations either. These heads are important enough to have been directly called out by the FNAF character encyclopedia. In the game prior, FNAF 4, Afton's final line was, "I will put you back together." And in FNAF 5, we see exactly that. A bunker made by Afton full of robotic humanoids. A mad scientist of a man trying to use his robotic skills to bring a human back to life, to put his loved ones back together, literally. Going back to the movie, this is likely why we see a humanoid animatronic with teeth, silver eyes, and an arm with 5 articulated human fingers buried in the parts and services room. It's not just an Easter egg put there from scraps laying around the Jim Henson office. This looks like it's a first-generation robot person. So we have an Afton that's already harvesting and experimenting with Remnant at the beginning of this film. And we know that there's a human-shaped robot buried in the parts and services room that suggests that he might have been working on some sort of human prototype. That right there, though, is still a long way away from creating a convincing enough robot that it's able to fool literally everyone around it. And why then would it be Vanessa, of all people? Well, the first thing I'd like to talk about here is actually something that jumped out to me the first time I watched the movie: the performance of Vanessa's actress, Elizabeth Lale. Something I noticed throughout the movie was how aloof and disconnected Vanessa seemed. Her voice was always flat, her character almost always stoic.
The new security guard?
Yeah.
You're bleeding, by the way.
You and Abby, you still have each other. From where I sit, I'd say you're lucky.
And for the times that she actually did show emotion, she was flipping on a dime, seemingly out of nowhere.
Take care of your sister.
You can do whatever you want with your own life, but if you ever bring Abby back here again, I will shoot you.
Considering the character that she's based on from the games, you'd think that she might be more bubbly or energetic based on how she was in Security Breach.
Hello, little boy. If you're down here, say something. Hey, little man. Do you know what time it is? The doors are open. Why are you still here?
And this isn't meant to be some sort of critique on Elizabeth Lale's performance or anything like that. We know that she's a talented actor. I mean, just check out some of the clips of her playing Anna in the show Once Upon a Time.
He's Prince Charming, and you're Snow White, and those things sound terrible, but they also sound romantic. What is that amazing smell? Chocolate!
No, the flatter delivery from her has to have been an intentional direction that she was given. Perhaps direction to sound a bit more robotic. In the novelization, Vanessa seems to shift personalities on a dime, changing between what Mike describes as the bubbly girl mode and the intensely serious cop mode. For example, during their first night meeting, we get this, quote, "Then someone invisible flipped a switch. Vanessa's cop mode deactivated." That right there, it's a pretty suspicious way of phrasing a psychological change like that. Intentionally using robotic language in this franchise? Yeah, press X to doubt. The same thing happens towards the end of the movie too, where after Vanessa's stabbed by Afton, Abby notices this, quote again, "Vanessa's eyes looked weird, like they were lights that were having a hard time staying on." And speaking of both Vanessa's eyes and her personality shifts, the absolute biggest piece of evidence here, Vanessa's eyes literally change color when she shifts personalities. Check it out, again from the book, page 144. Right after Mike tells Vanessa about his Garrett kidnapping dreams, quote, "The narrowing of the eyes, the stiffening of her mouth, she was back in cop mode." No, Mike thought, it wasn't cop mode, it was something else. Vanessa's irises deepened noticeably in hue. They went from their usual soft, almost grayish blue to a deeper indigo. The color shift was so pronounced that it almost looked computer generated. Computer generated, huh? What a choice of words that is. An indigo, you say? You mean the color that some would confuse with purple? But perhaps the single most telling part of this little paragraph comes in the final line. It was enormously disquieting. Mike felt like he was watching a human turning into, and then he trails off, not having a chance to finish the thought. Turning into what, Mike? Turning Turning into what? A robot, perhaps? This thing with the eyes, it isn't just a one-off change, it is a consistent part of Vanessa's character descriptions throughout the entire novel, while explaining how spring locks work. Quote, Vanessa's irises did the light blue to dark blue thing. Her eyes had turned an even deeper blue, navy blue now, almost black. As Vanessa's explaining her father's creations like the spring locks, again, the eyes get darker, sometimes purple and sometimes black. It's almost as if she's fallen back on some sort of Afton-designed programming, almost like he's controlling her. In fact, every time Vanessa tries to do something to keep Mike from looking into this mystery and uncovering Afton's secrets, her eyes go to this darker color. In the scene next to the storm drain where she tries to convince Mike not to try sleeping and dreaming of Freddy anymore, her eyes are dark blue. In the same scene, as Mike tries to get Vanessa to open up so he can get to know her better, he notices that her eyes grow darker and become blurred. And then something, in quotes, breaks any connection that they're forming. And yet, when she's begging for him not to go to Freddy's at all, to save himself and Abby, again, quote, he looked into her eyes, so soft and blue right now that it seemed like some of her essence, life force, was leaching from her. If there's some Afton-driven programming controlling Vanessa, that would also explain one of the stranger moments from the film. After Mike is attacked by the animatronics and saved by Vanessa, she reveals the dark secrets of her past and the pizzeria. When Mike asks her to help save Abby, though, she declines. Not because she doesn't want to help, but because she feels like she literally can't.
Come with me.
No, if he's there, I won't be any use to you, believe me.
And when she does show up to the pizzeria later on, once confronted by Afton, she's only able to bring herself to shoot once before completely freezing up, kinda like a computer that's crashed. Even my favorite line of the movie.
You had one job, keep him in the dark and kill him if he got too close.
That's 2 jobs.
Is a robotic, process-driven answer. And before you say that Vanessa can't be a robot because we see her get stabbed and have to go to the hospital, yeah, that's admittedly the biggest point against the theory. That said, remember the franchise that we're talking about here, friends? These robots can be so lifelike, so realistic that you cannot tell them apart from real humans at all. They eat, they sleep, they breathe, they can even bleed like Charlie does in the original FNAF book trilogy. I get that the FNAF franchise tends to be cryptic, but time and time again, there have been signs that someone in this franchise is a robot. Maybe it was Gregory from Security Breach. We know for a fact that Charlie from the book trilogy was, Jessica from Frailty, Billy from B7, Sarah from To Be Beautiful, the list goes on and on and on. They are hitting us over the head time and again with these kids who become robots. And if I just keep saying that one of these characters is in fact an animatronic, eventually I will be right. Right. This would even make some strange imagery from the games make more sense. Remember the unmasked ending from Security Breach? No, of course not. Why would you? Well, in it, we see 2 Vanessas. One who's fallen to the ground and died, while another's still up on the roof of the building looking down at the scene. This was always weird, and we as a FNAF community just kind of politely ignored it. But it suddenly makes a lot more sense if Vanessa is in fact a robot. This is just 2 recreations of the same model. One became active the second the other one died, which again is something that we see happening in the original novel trilogy with Charlie bots. But why? Sure, Afton might be creepy, and he's even creepier in the book, but why go through all of this trouble? Keep the pizzeria up and running, hire new guards to farm Remnant from, create an animatronic as human as Vanessa? Why is he doing it? Well, the answer seems to be staring us in the face throughout the movie. It's this. The Ella Springlock suit in the back. Think about it. Vanessa's incredibly cautious around this animatronic in the film, warning Mike not to go near it and going as far as threatening to shoot him if he brings Abby back to the pizzeria. If she loves all these animatronics so much, why is she so cautious about this one? Well, what if it already killed someone? Someone Vanessa knows very well. Someone like herself. Afton's daughter, the original Vanessa. I believe that in his desire to create the best animatronics possible, Afton created this Ella Springlock animatronic, and it ended up killing his own daughter. Just like what we see happen with Baby in the games. That is where his obsession started. His desire to find the secrets of life after death. He wanted to rebuild his daughter, and in the process, he discovered Remnant, how to create it, the pain required for it. That's why he built the torture device with the green Freddy mask, and made sure that it was close to the Ella animatronic in the parts and services room. Afton wanted to infuse the suit with Remnant, all in the hopes of bringing back his real Vanessa. Eventually, he was able to build the Vanessa that we see in the movie, but even then, she's difficult. She rebels. She doesn't want to help him as much, especially when children like Abby get involved. It's not his real Vanessa, and so Afton will keep trying and trying and trying. And if I'm right about this, it tells us a huge amount about where the franchise is headed in the next film. In our last theory, we suggested that Mike's brother Garrett is likely the identity of the puppet in the films, and will probably be the centerpiece of the second movie. I mean, the credits literally end with the puppet telling both Mike and the audience to come find me. However, this is gonna be a problem for Mike, Abby, and Vanessa. You see, Afton has a strange connection with Garrett. In the book, Garrett actually appears in the pizzeria during the final battle, luring Mike to a more secluded area where Afton can ambush him. Afton has control over Garrett's spirit in the scene, enough so that Garrett literally melts into the shadows that Afton emerges from. Quote from the book, "It was as if Garrett became part of the gloaming under the archway. He was there, and then he was something else. In Garrett's place, someone in a rabbit costume appeared. Not just someone, a man." So if Afton controls Garrett's spirit, it's likely that the puppet is going to be the villain of the second film, creating a whole new conflict for Mike to overcome. And then if the third movie follows the third game, an undead Afton will be back as the main antagonist, with the grand reveal that he's been able to make robot people the entire time. Vanessa will be revealed to be a robot, and Afton will tempt Mike with exactly what he wants. He could put Garrett back together as a robot kid, exactly the way Mike remembered him as a child, just as Afton did with his daughter. All Mike has to do is help Afton with his evil experiments, and Mike then will be left with a choice. Just how badly does he want his brother back? Guess we'll have to watch the movie, and then read the corresponding 8-book series released afterward to find out.
The plot for the second Five Nights at Freddy's movie is right in front of us. In celebration of the franchise's 10th anniversary, Scott released 4 pages of the script, but only one of them is real. The key to figuring out which one is hidden on one of these script pages, and I figured it out. I know which one it is. I'm not crazy, you're crazy. Can you believe that we're almost coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the FNAF movie? It's surreal after we waited for any update on that movie for so long. And well, if you really want to feel old, right now is the 10-year anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's as an entire franchise. A decade of games, books, comics, and more game theories than should have been possible. And in celebration, FNAF creator Scott Cawthon has gone all out. There's been new announcements, new games, a new interactive novel, a new interview, and even a frickin' crossover with Dead by Daylight. But most importantly, and the reason we are once again talking about one of game theory's favorite franchises on our film channel for the second week in a row, Scott also released 4 individual pages from the script for Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the upcoming sequel to the movie. But there's a catch. Only one of these pages is real and is actually in the script. Only one of these pages is in the movie. Loyal theorists, this is a challenge. Scott looked at the community of overthinkers that he's gathered for FNAF and challenged us to figure out which one of these is actually real. And you know what, Scott? I'm not scared. I will personally take on your challenge, and I'll figure out which one of these pages is legit and which ones are just mimic knockoffs. And let me tell you, friends, after digging through them, comparing them to what we know about FNAF lore, and looking at these pages through the lens of the rules and etiquette of screenplays, I did it! I know which one of them is real, and it tells us so much about where the FNAF movie franchise is going. With just this one page, I believe we can map out not only the plot of FNAF 2, but also FNAF 3. Get your animatronic suits ready, friends, as we take a bite out of these pages. So because it's been about a year since the original FNAF movie hit theaters and we all did the Leo DiCaprio pointing meme when Matt popped up, let's do a recap so we're all on the same page of where things ended up. Five Nights at Freddy's follows Mike Schmidt, a young man struggling to take care of his younger sister Abby and keep down a steady job. His parents aren't around anymore, and he has nightmares about his brother Garrett, who was kidnapped and killed when Mike was just a child. Mike gets a job as a night security guard at a local Chuck E. Cheese ripoff called Freddy Fazbear's that's been shut down for years, since several kids went missing from the building. Over the course of a week, Mike meets a police officer named Vanessa and realizes that the pizzeria's animatronic mascots are haunted by the ghosts of those missing kids, and they want Abby to join them as a ghost in the restaurant. Oh, and also the man who gave Mike this job in the first place, William Afton, he not only was the founder of the pizzeria and creator of the animatronics, but he also murdered the kids and Mike's brother. Mike, Abby, and Vanessa team up, free the ghost kids from Afton's control, and Afton is killed by a malfunctioning animatronic springlock suit. But he warns that
I always come back.
And more or less, that's the movie. So what are the new pages we're dealing with? Let's go over them one by one. The first page has Abby talking with a new animatronic called Toy Chica. The toy animatronics are improved versions of the characters from the original FNAF introduced in the FNAF 2 game. They were much more advanced than the original animatronics, with a facial recognition system and child protection software programmed into them that would protect kids from anyone the animatronics deemed dangerous. Back to the page, as Toy Chica and Abby are talking, talking, Vanessa is being held in the pizzeria's storage room, forced to give out some sort of code. Toy Chica then relays that to Abby, who is typing it into a computer. Abby puts in the code, Toy Chica's eyes light up, and excitedly she says, "You did it, Abby! We are free!" If I were a betting man, this page is showing Abby being tricked by the animatronics into freeing them from some form of their child protection software, so they can move around and hurt anyone they'd like, even if they're not deemed a predator or dangerous. The second page, however, is completely different. Here we are introduced to General Everly and Captain Nelson, two completely original characters who aren't in the game. The pair have a conversation in some sort of conference room about a robotics project. Here, General Everly vents his frustration that the government funded Fazbear Entertainment, completely dumbfounded that they would get in bed with a pizza place. When it's pointed out that Fazbear Entertainment is way ahead on animatronic tech, Everly lashes out that this sort of technology shouldn't be tested on kids' entertainment, and that what Fazbear gave them wasn't animatronic tech, but instead observable effects of unobservable energy exchanges. The third page starts with a conversation between Abby and Mike about a book where a boy gets sick with a very contagious disease called scarlet fever. The boy has plushies that he loves dearly, but they have to be burned because the scarlet fever has likely attached to the plushies, making them very dangerous. Apparently, Mike and Abby are dealing with some weird plushies themselves, and Mike realizes that Abby is saying that these plushies are dangerous too. Just like the book, they should be burned. Later, he calls up Vanessa and tells her to suit up in dark clothing because they have a job to do. Finally, the fourth page sees an unnamed man with two kids, Darren and Gemma, as they enter an abandoned Freddy's pizzeria. Here, the man turns on a carousel and leads the kids to the center of the carousel, where there's a hidden staircase descending into the darkness below. The three of them then descend into it, their fates unknown. So, which one is real? Well, all of them have interesting ideas and bits that hint at them being real, but some are less realistic than others. To start, let's tackle the one I think is least likely to be the real page, the second page. This is the one where a group of army officers are talking about the animatronic tech that Fazbear Entertainment is developing. Now, there are a lot of fun little secrets hidden on this page. The general calls Fazbear Entertainment a circus, for instance, a circus as in it's a joke. This is a nice reference to one of the current talking points in the FNAF fan community, speculating about its origins as Fazbear's traveling circus in the 1970s. But despite that, this page is clearly fake for a few reasons. The first big reason is that this is introducing an element to the franchise that they've never used before, with the military. The strategy the FNAF movies seem to be taking is approaching the series as a whole, the games, books, whatever, throwing it all in a blender and then shaping their story from the resulting Fazgoo. While Afton did talk to some supervising body during the opening cutscene of Sister Location where they asked about some of his design ideas,
with all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
Saying that this is a government entity is a stretch. Afton has never been said to have government backing in the games. It would require a lot of explanation for how and why this is even a thing, and we would need to spend so much time to explore what this meant for the story. And frankly, it just expands this franchise way too far, way too quickly. We're suddenly going from one crazy guy in a pizzeria to an entirely government-funded operation. This isn't a movie 2 thing. This feels like something you do in like movie 4, right before you jump the shark and go to space. More importantly, this interaction happens on page 18, which means it takes place at a weird point in the movie. But to understand why, we first have to talk about movie structure. See, a movie is generally broken down into 5 parts: the cold open, acts 1 through 3, and then the resolution. It starts with the cold open, which immediately drops you into the world and acts as a hook to get you engaged with the story. In FNAF 1, this is the security guard at the start of the film getting hunted by the animatronics. Then there's Act 1, where the main characters are introduced and the conflict of the story is discovered. In FNAF, we see this with Mike losing his job and needing to take the gig at Freddy's so he can take care of Abby. Screenwriters are taught that, as a general rule of thumb, 1 page of a script is equal to about 1 minute of screen time. To be clear, this isn't written in stone. A lot of scripts are much longer than the movie's final runtime, and a lot of long movies are made from super short scripts. The minute per page idea is like the pirate code.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
It mostly applies, enough that we can use it here. So, following this rule, at page 18, that means that this scene with the military would be happening somewhere like 15 or 20 minutes into the movie, making it a scene smack dab in the middle of Act 1. That makes no sense, considering everything else that Act 1 of this movie needs to do. It needs to tell us what Mike, Abby, and Vanessa have have been up to, show us their new dynamic, introduce us to the new conflict. It has a lot of heavy lifting it needs to do, so cutting away to the military drama here makes zero narrative sense, so we can safely eliminate this page. The act structure also lets us eliminate another page, the first one, where Vanessa is being forced to give Toy Chica a code and Abby is typing that code into a computer. Now, the concept of this scene, Vanessa being tortured to give up valuable information and Abby being tricked into using it to free the toy animatronics, that could absolutely be in a movie like this. It's in character and the conflict makes sense. However, the placement of the scene makes no sense. This page is labeled as page 25, meaning that it would be roughly 23 to 28 minutes into the movie. That would place it either at the middle or end of Act 1. But that's way too fast for something like this to happen, and let's go over the rest of story structure to understand why. Normally, Act 2 of a story sees the characters encountering obstacles that stop them from getting what they want or need. It's also generally the lowest point for the main character. In the first FNAF movie, this is where Mike is trying to discover the secrets of Freddy's and agrees to let the animatronics have Abby. Act 3 sees the big climax of the story where all of the conflict is resolved. Mike, Abby, and Vanessa fight Afton and get the animatronics to turn on him. And finally, there's the resolution, which is a brief period of calm where a new status quo is established. Mike and Abby are living happily and visit a recovering Vanessa in the hospital. What's being described here in this page with Abby, Vanessa, and Toy Chica, it could absolutely happen in this movie, at the end of Act 2, much further than page 25. Think of everything that needs to happen before this scene. We have to get reintroduced to the main characters, meet the new toy animatronics, have the child protection software be explained, have Toy Chica build up a relationship with Abby, and Vanessa needs to be captured. That can all happen by the end of Act 2, or into Act 3, but Act 1? No way. See, I really appreciate this page because it's really clever. The scene itself is realistic, and you do input codes into the baby animatronic in the sister location game. Abby is connected to baby, so the ideas line up, but the timeline just doesn't. So, good troll, Scott. And so, that leaves us with just 2 pages left, and honestly, both of these are pretty valid options. Just as a reminder, these are the pages where Abby and Mike are talking about the dangerous plushies, and where an unnamed man is leading 2 kids into a hidden room below the pizzeria. Both of these pages take place at reasonable points in the movie. The Mike and Abby scene is on page 58, so roughly an hour into the movie in the middle of Act 2. That's the perfect point for this sort of story revelation and the setup for an action set piece like we see on this page. Likewise, the man taking the kids into a secret room is on page 4, so right at the beginning of the movie. Again, makes perfect sense because this is exactly the sort of scene you'd want for a cold open to hook you into the story. Who is this guy? What's this secret room? What's gonna happen to these kids? It's good stuff. And nothing completely unrealistic or ridiculous happens on either one of these pages that disqualifies them, like the military page. Like, the cold open page is pretty standard killer luring kids into a dangerous place horror cliche, and there absolutely would be rooms hidden under an Afton pizzeria. We've seen that exact setup in other FNAF content like Sister Location and the Twisted Ones novel. As for the plushies, well, weird haunted plush babies are present in the Help Wanted series, and they attack the player, so they would be dangerous in the movie. The first FNAF movie also had the Balloon Boy toy that was basically a haunted, sentient toy, just like these plushies would be, so there's already precedence for this in the film universe. In fact, the Balloon Boy is like one of the movie's biggest hanging threads. They'd probably want to resolve that. And all of that's without mentioning that the plush babies would further the connection between Abby and Baby. Oh, and also there's Plush Trap 2, which is just straight up a plush version of the main villain that is alive and dangerous. I don't think that's what they're talking about here in the movie, but I just wanted to point it out because it's a relevant detail. But with all of that being said, there is one thing that gives away the answer here. In the cold open page, there's mention of a carousel. This is where the man takes the children and reveals the hidden room, but it's shown to have 7 animatronics on it. A brown bear, a blue bunny, a yellow chick, a pirate fox, a gator, a wolf, and a hippo. In the games, there are only really 2 carousels that we know of, the one in FNAF 2 and the one in Help Wanted 2, and between them, the only characters that show up on them are Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Balloon Boy. Never a hippo, wolf, or alligator. Now, that's not to say they couldn't bring in other FNAF characters to fill in those spots, but it would be weird and it would make the timeline get real funky. Like, the hippo is absolutely referring to Mr. Hippo, an animatronic that first appeared in FNAF 6. It doesn't really make sense for Mr. Hippo to be here with the original FNAF animatronics, but I guess it's not impossible possible? In FNAF 3, the purple mask of a character that is almost certainly Mr. Hippo shows up in the Happiest Day minigame, implying that he could exist at the same time. But the other characters, though, are just much harder to justify. Now, for the Gator, I think all of our minds immediately jump to Monty Gator from Security Breach, but it is possible that this is referring to some other character, maybe? In The Man in Room 1280 story, the book's version of the Golden Freddy spirit, Andrew wears an alligator mask, so one existed that early in at least some version of the FNAF timeline. And additionally, going back to the Happiest Day minigame, there's a green mask that could also be an alligator, but considering that the other masks, the pink pig, the purple hippo, and the orange elephant line up way more with the mediocre Melodies characters, I believe that this mask is actually referring to the Happy Frog. The eyes on the sprite are even yellow like the circles around Happy Frog's eyes, so I wouldn't be comfortable saying that the gator on the carousel in the script page is referring to anyone else other than Monty. He's just the only one that makes sense. All that being said though, the real outlier here is the wolf. The earliest wolf that we know of in the timeline is from the Twisted Ones, which is the book version of the FNAF 4 story, which features the Twisted Wolf animatronic. And we also know that there was a man-wolf character on a poster in FNAF 6. But why would either of those characters be on this carousel? That's a great question, and it really doesn't make sense. No, if this wolf is any character, it's almost certainly Roxy from Security Breach, which would also line up with Monty Gator. Regardless, having Roxy and Monty here is just weird. The first movie was not shy about mixing elements from various games, but something it kept very consistent was its animatronics. It didn't overcomplicate them or introduce too many. Its cast was pretty consistent with the one from the games. So why on earth would they bring in Mr. Hippo from FNAF 6 and two characters from Security Breach with the original FNAF animatronics? Especially given just how much attention Scott pays to the tiniest details in his work. It just doesn't make any sense, and why I think that this page is a fake. Oh, and also one of the kids on this page literally says the words, "This is a fake," so another subtle tip off there. Very cheeky, Scott. Nice hint. So there you have it. That leaves us with page 3 as the one I believe is the real page from the FNAF 2 movie. But we're not done. Now that we've concluded that this one is real, what does that tell us about the movie itself? Well, the main thing that stuck out to me about this page, beyond the fact that we're apparently getting haunted plushies or something like that, was the book that Mike and Abby were talking about. In case you need a reminder, on this page, Abby is talking about a book where a little boy has plushies that he loves, but after he gets sick with scarlet fever, he can't keep them. The disease is just so contagious that it might attach to the plushies and spread that way, so the plushies have to be burned. She then goes on to liken the book to the dangerous plushies that the gang is currently facing. Well, if the plushies from that book were so applicable to the current situation in this FNAF story, is there anything else from the book that would also apply? Well, after some research, I was able to figure out that the book that they're talking about here is a classic known as The Velveteen Rabbit, written by Marjorie Williams. This story is told from the point of view of a plush rabbit toy given to a small boy as a Christmas present. The rabbit desperately wants to become real and is told that it's possible when a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Over the years, though the boy gets other toys and presents that are more modern, he grows to love the rabbit plush and regards it as his favorite toy, treating it like it was a real rabbit. However, sadly, the boy is diagnosed with scarlet fever, a highly contagious disease. The boy takes the rabbit as he recovers, but when the boy is taken away to see other doctors, all of his possessions must be burned so that the scarlet fever has no chance to spread on his belongings. The night before the rabbit is to be burned, he reflects on the happy life he had with the boy and manages to shed a real tear. This summons a fairy that turns the rabbit into a real one for everyone to see, not just the boy, because the boy truly loved him. The next spring, the rabbit visits the boy, who is happy to see that the rabbit is real, alive, and living his best life out in the wild. I mean, guys, come on, just on the face of things, there are so many parallels between this story and FNAF. First of all, a story about a rabbit that wants to become real? Well, FNAF is a series all about a man obsessed with a rabbit costume who wants to be reborn. He wants to make his dead daughter come back, that sort of thing. Those themes line up so perfectly that it's scary. And even if you just want to talk about the movie universe, Abby loved the animatronics. She may want to help them become real by helping them find peace and move on to the afterlife. A darker interpretation could even focus on Mike here. We're pretty sure that his brother Garrett, who was killed by Afton in the previous movie, is gonna come come back in this movie as the puppet. Perhaps Mike will have a similar moment here like the boy and the stuffed rabbit, except in reverse. He may see the toy that resembles his real brother and be sad that it's trapped and try to work to free Garrett. But the biggest thing here is the use of fire in the Velveteen Rabbit. A parallel for the dangerous and contagious scarlet fever from the book in the FNAF universe may be Remnant. And one of the ways that the game says that you can destroy Remnant is through the use of fire, just like how the rabbit is set to be burned to get rid of any traces of scarlet fever. That may very well be the key to defeating the big bad of this movie and freeing whatever spirits are trapped in the pizzeria. If that's the case, that also tells us that the FNAF movie sequel is going to be incorporating elements of both the games FNAF 2 and FNAF 3, combining elements of both into one story. See, FNAF 3 is not exactly the sort of game that is easily adapted into an exciting film. It's just two characters alone in a building. But at the end of that story, Mike burns down the pizzeria to defeat Afton. That could be moved to the FNAF movie sequel, with Mike and Vanessa burning down Freddy's to release the spirits and destroy any remnant inside. It also opens the door for the series to immediately move on to a bigger adaptation of Sister Location as a way to finish off the movie series, all while mixing in elements of FNAF 4's dream sequences as backstory, maybe for Garrett. Honestly, after sitting here and just thinking about it, that arc makes so much sense. And after spending just way too much time trying to figure out which one of these pages is real, I just can't imagine a better path forward for these movies. But then again, Scott always manages to completely pull the rug out from under us, revealing a new trapdoor and deeper levels to the story than we could ever imagine, so maybe we'll never escape. The teaser trailer for Five Nights at Freddy's 2 has finally dropped, and it managed to pack so much about its plot into just 50 seconds, enough to solve this movie months before it's out. Five Nights at Freddy's is coming back to theaters this year. We're truly in the end game now, and the marketing for the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie has started up, with our first big look into the film coming with its official teaser trailer. Now, obviously, FNAF is a huge part of Theorist history. I mean, it feels like we've done literally hundreds of videos about this franchise over at our sister location Game Theory. But the films are an entirely different beast, an entirely different timeline to theorize about. Matt trusted me to take on franchises like this as the film theorist. He trusted me to do our very first theory predicting the first movie because he was in it. So it's time to do the same with FNAF 2. In the past couple of weeks, Tom and I have sat down and really put our heads together to figure out what the heck is going on here. Like, clearly this movie is taking cues from the FNAF 2 game, but that was a prequel to the first game, and this is clearly a sequel. What are the consequences of that change? And what does it mean for the story? Well, it might not look like we have a lot to work with to figure that out. I mean, this trailer is barely 45 seconds long. Can we really crack this movie wide open with just that? Well, we figured out more with less, and I think we've done it, loyal theorists. By looking at this teaser, comparing it to what we know from the game series, adding in our speculation from the fallout of the first movie, and using the rules and laws of filmmaking in horror series like this, I believe I've solved where this movie is headed months before it's out. And not only that, but I think we can get a pretty good idea of where the inevitable FNAF 3 movie is headed to. So grab your spring-lock suits, loyal theorists, as we take a bite out of this teaser. So okay, first things first, let's make sure we're all on the same page after this first movie, just in case you need a little refresher. And I mean, it has been a couple of years at this point, so understandable. Five Nights at Freddy's was the story of Mike Schmidt, a down-on-your-luck young man taking care of his kid sister Abby as he takes on a job as the night security guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Mike is haunted by guilt for the death of his little brother Garrett, who was murdered by the serial killer William Afton, who also so happens to be the owner of Freddy's and killed several other children at the pizzeria years ago, and now those spirits haunt the restaurant and want Abby to become one of them. So Mike teams up with Afton's daughter Vanessa to take down Afton, save Abby, and hopefully find some peace for the ghost children. Well, at least until this sequel hits, right? Now, with that out of the way, let's go through this teaser shot by shot and frame by frame. We open on a poster for Freddy Fazbear's. The glass on this poster display is broken, which may mean that it's the same poster we see in the first movie. If you don't remember, Max's brother and his gang of hooligans smashed and shattered this glass when they broke into Freddy's in that movie. Not sure if it's exactly the same poster, but it probably doesn't matter since I doubt we'll be spending a significant amount of time here anyway. Regardless, we do know that we are going back to the original pizzeria in some way. We know this thanks to some of our fellow FNAF tubers who did a set visit during the filming of this movie. Here we see that the studio rebuilt a facade of the front of the restaurant, but not the whole thing, so I doubt we're going to be spending a ton of time inside of it. Either way, this is just an establishing shot for us and the teaser, so let's move on. Next, we see a shot of an endoskeleton endoskeleton turning on. If you don't know, these are the mechanical parts inside of the animatronics that let them move and work. We actually see some of them getting worked on in the previous movie, but it's also worth noting that this one from the teaser, it isn't the same type. This is an Endo 02, a more advanced type of endoskeleton that we first saw in the FNAF 2 game. And I mean, hey, that makes sense. Like, it's the FNAF 2 movie, of course they're taking cues from the FNAF 2 game. Anyway, you can tell this thanks to the curved mouth on this one. The original endoskeletons in the first movie had squared off mouths. And there's a voiceover for William Afton welcoming us back to Freddy's.
Welcome back. Are you ready to start the show?
It's a nice meta touch to get us back into this world, but in-universe, this is likely a recording or a flashback to when one of the restaurants is having its big opening. Since Afton is welcoming us back, I'm guessing that this is the sister location. It just seems more relevant than, say, the original location undergoing some sort of renovation and then reopening just for the sake of it. Either way, I expect that Afton's ghost will be using this audio to great effect. Like, if this is an actual audio recording, I could see him using it to torment Mike and the others. It would just be super creepy, and I'm all for it. Suddenly, we see ourselves in some sort of circus or fair. It's almost certainly Freddy Fazbear themed, since we see kids in the background dressed up as characters from Freddy's. And there are also some themed attractions using those characters here. I'm almost certain that this is going to be an event called FazFest. We know that this is likely going to be a big part of the story, since those YouTubers I mentioned earlier, like Daco, visited the set and found posters for this event. Now, this is interesting because the idea of a circus or of a carnival or fair is a big talking point in the FNAF community right now. I briefly mentioned this in my last FNAF movie theory, but in the lore of the Freddy's games, there was an event called Fall Fest that ran from around 1970 until at least 1983. It's a huge part of the history of these characters in this world, and Scott seems to be bringing these ideas into the film universe in a new way. Let's be real, that makes sense with the way the movies have been streamlining and combining the expansive lore of the series, so yeah. The next thing we see is Abby pulling up to the second Freddy's location on her bike. This is the sister location, so to speak. So there are actually a few things we can gather from this shot. First off, if we look at both the state of the restaurant and the surrounding area, this location has been abandoned for a long time. The outside of the building is run down, and the parking lot is overgrown with weeds and grass and the like. We can actually see this more clearly in those behind-the-scenes set visits from the FNAF tubers. Oh, and funnily enough, this building is actually in the same parking lot as the facade of the first Freddy's location that they built for this movie. But just so everyone's aware, that doesn't mean that they're going to be in the same location or even anywhere close to each other in the actual movie. Film productions do this sort of thing all the time, reusing sets and locations and either changing the camera angles or background details to make them seem like different locations. It just saves on production costs, which is almost certainly what's happening here since this is a relatively low-budget horror film. Anyway, the second thing that we can gather from this shot of Abby, well, given Abby's expression here, she's likely never been to this location before. So, she's likely been drawn here by something, and I think I know what that thing is. Right after this in the teaser, we see a shot of Mike finding a note taped to his door, reading, "Gone to fix my friends." This is probably from Abby and is explaining why she's left and gone to the sister location. The friends that she's talking about here in the note are probably the ghosts in the original animatronics. If you remember, Abby was super close to them in the previous film, enough so that they wanted her to be like them. But they seemed to end the last movie in a little bit of peace. So this note tells us that they're still in contact with Abby and that something has gone wrong since the last movie. Now that thing that's gone wrong could be a lot of things. Being trapped in new animatronic bodies, being tortured by Afton's ghost, but another big option? Perhaps that AI has gone a little rogue in these animatronics and is somehow controlling or hurting the spirits. Anyway, we might also know how they're talking to Abby. During one of his charity live streams, Daco revealed an image of a Fast Talker toy provided to him by the film's production, with a screen on it reading, "You there?" Basically, if I had to guess, this looks like a way that the ghosts are communicating with the living characters. Now, this thing is strange because nothing like it has ever really appeared in the games. The closest we get is Afton's walkie-talkie in sister location, which he uses to communicate with the crying child. But even that is weird and different than what we're seeing here. The ghosts in the film seem to be able to just talk to Abby and communicate with other characters characters like Mike through their dreams. So perhaps this fast talker is a way for them to do so without needing them to be asleep. We then see a conversation between Vanessa and Mike, where Vanessa is warning him that
they're out there, Mike.
She's likely talking about the animatronics, which we'll get to in just a sec. But the big things here? Well, first off, Vanessa has completely recovered from her hospital stay, so I guess perhaps she was not a robot as much as Matt might have wanted her to be. But the other big thing here is that she's not wearing her cop uniform, either here or in any other shot in the teaser. Don't get me wrong, she could still be a cop and just be taking some time off or something, but this tells me that she's either stepped back from that role or has been let go from the force for some reason. We see another shot of her holding a gun later in the teaser, so she might still be on the force, but I wouldn't be surprised if her connection to a serial killer was somehow revealed and compromised her job. But anyway, why was she warning Mike that they're out there? Well, that's because of the next few shots that we see here. Yeah, we immediately see what looks like Toy Bonnie peeking in through a curtain into a window of a house. Shortly afterwards, there are a couple of other shots of Toy Bonnie lifting up some sort of needle as if he's about to attack somebody, and then a shot of a couple cowering in fear inside of a living room. These two shots are back to back, and though trailer editing doesn't mean that they're 100% connected, I'd be shocked if they weren't. Big picture here though is that Toy Bonnie and the other toy animatronics, as we're about to see, are no longer confined to the pizzeria, and that's a huge deal. See, the animatronics going out and about isn't really a thing that we ever see in the game series. The closest thing I can think of is in Sister Location when Innard leaves the Sister Location wearing Michael as a skin suit. But that's not nearly the same as the animatronics just like straight up roaming the streets like we see here. This is extra strange too because it's established in the series that this would be pretty difficult for them. Glamrock Freddy from Security Breach explains that if the animatronics leave the Pizzaplex, they will eventually run out of power. Some endings have Freddy using a car battery to stay active because of this. And it's not just the Security Breach animatronics either, but in the Week Before novel, a story set in the week before the FNAF 1 video game, one of the main goals of the original animatronics is to be able to leave the pizzeria. To do this, they overcharge themselves so they don't need to charge themselves again, at least for a while. These toy animatronics might need to recharge at some point, giving our heroes a ticking clock that they can outlast as the animatronics slowly have to power down, perhaps over a series of days. So basically, they'd have to survive 5 nights at Freddy's, or rather 5 nights outside of Freddy's. Of course, this scene with Toy Bonnie isn't the only scene throughout the teaser with the animatronics outside of the pizzeria. Later on, we see a man played by classic character actor Wayne Knight peering through a closet window in a school. He sees Toy Chica on the other side before she pulls him through the window, presumably to his death. We also see her feet in a room similar to this, but likely before or after she's pulled this man into the room, as well as a shot of Toy Chica opening some sort of garage with her hands. There's also shots of Mangle breaking in through a window in a house, another one of Mangle crashing into a car windshield, and then someone getting attacked and pulled up to the ceiling by Mangle. It looks like that last scene probably also takes place in this school, and another shot shortly after this sees another new character, a blonde girl, looking up and screaming. Given the angle of this shot looking down at this girl, this is likely from Mangle's point of view, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's immediately connected with the shot of Mangle pulling the other guy up to the ceiling. If I were to guess, this is likely a scene similar to the first movie where a bunch of side characters are killed to show just how dangerous these new animatronics are. I wouldn't be surprised if these characters go to school with Abby and are bullies or something similarly unlikable. We also see another shot of Mike, Abby, and Vanessa in what looks like an office in the school or some random house, looking terrified, so I'm betting that this school sequence is actually a big set piece for the movie. We then see a man's hand pressing a Showtime button to start an animatronic show. This is likely at the sister location since we see a different Showtime button in the first film, and that one's on a wall, not a podium. Next up, we have a shot of a silhouetted man in a hallway as doors fly open. This is actually a really effective shot in my opinion. It's very creepy. This man is almost certainly William Afton. His build just looks a lot like actor Matthew Lillard, and we know that he's going to be in this movie somewhere. I'm gonna say that this is either a dream sequence where he's haunting Mike and Vanessa, or it's literally his ghost haunting the two. Also worth noting that there are 6 doors in this scene, perhaps representing the 5 kids that Afton murdered from the restaurants, and Mike and Abby's brother Garrett, whom he also killed. This is likely setting up or reminding us of Afton's connection with Mike and Garrett, which will be explored later in the series. Actually, while we're on the subject, I gotta say, I think it's surprising the lack of Afton that we actually get in this teaser. Other than some voiceover and this scene here, the only other hint we get is a shot of Spring Bonnie's hand picking up a knife. I wouldn't be shocked if he's just not as present in this film as he was in the first one. I mean, it would be weird for him to come back as a big twist third act villain when that's exactly what he did in the first movie, right? The time spent with Afton here in this second movie, in my opinion, would be better spent setting him up as a larger villain in the third film, but I digress. Now we get a shot of a large Balloon Boy animatronic, eyes glowing as he activates inside one of the pizzerias. You can tell that it's that because of the checkerboard pattern here in the back of the shot. It's just classic FNAF imagery. Balloon Boy actually returns here from the first movie where he was just like a strange, haunted figurine. Talk about a glow up, am I right? So the fact that we're getting a Balloon Boy animatronic isn't that surprising. I mean, he was in the FNAF 2 game after all. But an interesting connection here that we put together? Well, in Tom's very first FNAF theory as host of Game Theory, he talked about the Fall Fest and how that makes Balloon Boy make way more sense. Like, a guy holding balloons doesn't really fit super well with animal animatronics, right? But it would make sense at something like a carnival or a circus. A character walking around handing out balloons to kids and visitors. The fact that the movie seems to be rolling the idea of the circus in here with FazFest just really makes that work even more. And finally, we hear Afton yell showtime before we see Toy Freddy walking through FazFest. If you notice, there are tons of other cosplayers here in the background, and it's just a really cool touch. Now then, that's all of the shots from the trailer, but what can we learn here by reading between the lines? And can we look back at some of our previous speculation and see how it lines up? Well, the first big flag that Matt and I planted in our speculation about the rest of the FNAF movie series was that Garrett, Mike's brother that Afton killed, was going to replace Charlie as the spirit possessing the puppet. If you don't remember, the puppet was an animatronic introduced in FNAF 2, so again, it would make sense for them to show up in this movie. Our big reasoning was that this would give Mike even more of a connection to Afton, offer some real emotional stakes to the other ghosts in the series, and that the puppet was teased in the credits of the first movie, spelling out "Come Find Me." Go check out our full theory talking about that if you want all the details. Well, this teaser gives us another big indication that the puppet is going to be a big player in the rest of this story, whether it's in this movie or another sequel. During some of Afton's voiceover in this teaser, we can hear the music box used to keep the puppet at bay in the FNAF 2 game playing in the background.
Welcome back. Are you ready to start the show?
So yeah, keep your eyes and ears peeled for more references to this and any indication that this version of the puppet is Garrett, because that is absolutely an arc that they're following here. A prediction that I'm a little less confident in though is my analysis of the script pages that Scott released. If you don't remember, last year in honor of the 10-year anniversary of FNAF, Scott released 4 pages of the script for FNAF 2. But the catch was that only one of them was real. If you want an in-depth look at these pages and an analysis of them, go check out my theory from last year. But the one that I thought was going to be the real one was this one, which talked about haunted plushies and Mike coming to the realization that he'd need to burn them. At the time, I was confident that this was pointing to the toy animatronics being the villains of this movie and the need to destroy them. But after this teaser, I'm just less sure about that. I mean, hey, you can't get them all right all the time. See, Abby is the one encouraging Mike to burn the toys in this page, but that doesn't line up with what we see here in the teaser where it looks like she's the one who wants to help save the plushies. So what does that mean for the pages? Well, if this one is incorrect, then I think the 4th page is. This one is from the cold open of the movie, describing a man taking his children into what we believe to be one of the pizzerias and into a secret room underneath its carousel. This page is an entirely realistic option. It actually came down to this one and the plushie burning page, but the reason I didn't go with it originally was because some of the characters present in the script probably shouldn't have been here. But now, especially with how the FNAF movie franchise is mixing and matching elements from across the entire game series and timeline, I'm less sure about that. So, okay, if this page is legit, then that begs the question, who is this guy? This man leading these kids into some level below the pizzeria? Well, obvious answer would be Afton, and that this is some sort of flashback, but the page really implies that these kids are his actual children. We don't see Vanessa here in this flashback, so I don't think that this is Afton. So, who is it? Well, I believe that it's the person who's taken over Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria and is the entire reason this second movie is happening. Hear me out. So, I'm pretty sure that the shot of Toy Freddy walking through FazFest is set in the film's modern day and not during a flashback. Why do I think that? Well, think back to those set visit videos we talked about earlier. In those, Dawko and the other FNAF tubers found posters for FazFest on the facade of the rundown buildings. If this FazFest was set in the past or during a flashback, flashback, the building shouldn't be nearly this run down. So, okay, FazFest is set during the modern day, but what does that matter? Well, think about this. The last time that we saw Afton, he was dying in his Springlock suit and his soul was being tortured by Golden Freddy. So if FazFest is set in the current day, and if Afton, the person who owns the Freddy Fazbear franchise, is dead, who is putting on FazFest? Well, if I were a betting man, just like in FNAF 3 where some third party came in and bought all of the Freddy Fazbear assets to make a horror attraction, someone came in and bought all of Afton's assets after he died, and they're trying to relaunch the Freddy IP with this FazFest. That is the guy from the cold open page. Oh, and as an aside, this could also explain why Abby feels like she needs to go help her friends. If a new group or company has come in and bought up all of the Freddy Fazbear assets and are trying to relaunch things, they may have taken parts from the previous animatronics to sort of repair or enhance the toy animatronics. And if they mixed and matched parts from the different animatronics, that could leave the spirits feeling mixed up and confused, similar to how the Funtime animatronics from the games were built using Remnant, which just jumbled up their spirits. If you don't know what Remnant is, bless you, you sweet summer child. It's a long story and not super relevant to this theory today, so just don't worry about it. Anyway, I believe that is the underlying storyline of this film. Someone new has come in to buy up Freddy, and they stumbled into something way darker than they anticipated. They somehow activated the toy animatronics, angered the ghosts, and now they're on a killing rampage through this town. So Mike, Abby, and Vanessa have to stop the animatronics while helping to save the ghosts, all while they're haunted by the memory of Afton and Garrett. Perhaps literally. So that's a lot, and while that's everything I think we can glean about this movie from this teaser, I do believe we can sit down and look at what they've shown us here and get an idea of where future FNAF movies are going to. See, the very fact that we see the animatronics out and about in neighborhoods and carnivals and schools in this movie means that the FNAF film franchise is following an arc traditional for these sorts of horror films. With every single film, they need to be going bigger and better than the last, from one building to a larger neighborhood and a school in FNAF's case. And that tells us a lot about the stories they're going to adapt for the third film. We've talked about this in previous FNAF movie theories before, about how a third FNAF movie likely isn't adapting FNAF 3 because it isn't as exciting a game to transfer to the big screen. Like, if they kept things super faithful, it would just be like Josh Hutcherson and William Afton hanging out in an old building for an hour and a half. It's not exactly riveting cinema. And after watching this teaser, I think Scott and the filmmakers have realized this too, because they already seem to be incorporating a lot of the more interesting details from the FNAF 3 game into this movie, with someone new coming in to restart Freddy's. Because they're already likely using that plot point from the FNAF 3 game, I doubt that they'd reuse it in the FNAF 3 movie, so they'll need to do something else. FNAF 4 and being stuck in a dream makes even less sense, because it's so heavy and weird and isn't the escalation that the filmmakers are probably looking for. Right, a dream just feels smaller instead of going bigger. That's the natural arc of these sorts of films, and why eventually we get movies like Jason X where they jumped the shark so high they ended up in space. So think that through. We went from being in one location in FNAF 1, the pizzeria, where most of the hauntings happen in a single place. Once you actually leave Freddy Fazbear's, the characters were more or less safe for the rest of the movie. Now we're in FNAF 2, where the threats and hauntings have escalated outwards. The animatronics are no longer confined to a single location. They're out and about, attacking people in a wider set of locations like in a neighborhood or at a school. So what would a third movie need to do to go even bigger than that? My first thought was that maybe, hey, they'll pull a Jurassic Park 2 and we'll end up in a city of some sort. And then I thought, nah, that'd be kinda dumb. Like, what is Scott gonna do here? Pull out the old Plushies Take Manhattan script? No, man, no. They could do something similar to Pizzeria Simulator, but I'm also skeptical of that simply because they don't really have enough characters to do the whole gather and burn it all down like we see in that game. 2 movies worth of animatronics just isn't enough, so what's the next logical step then? Well, say it with me, security breach. I mean, yeah, we saw that coming. We already have Vanessa as a main character in these films. A large mall or building like a Pizzaplex is a natural escalation for these sorts of horror film franchises. This would let us introduce another new slate of animatronic characters that fit the cast that we've established in these movies, and the bones of the security breach story would allow for closure for Mike, Abby, and Vanessa. They could end the story by burning everything down and releasing the spirits of the dead kids, all while moving on from the trauma and experience themselves. Plus, it would allow for this FNAF movie trilogy to hit all of the biggest and most recognizable parts of the FNAF games, while leaving other, more out there projects like Help Wanted or the novels open for adaptation down down the line should the movie franchise be successful enough to continue. It all just makes too much sense, and that's why I'm planting my flag here now. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is going to be a security breach adaptation. And hey, maybe if it does well enough, one day we'll get far enough along in this series to adapt FNAF World. I actually think that would legitimately be pretty cool. Listen, at this point, if you're familiar with the Theorist channels at all, you know we cover a lot of Five Nights at Freddy's. It feels like we've made hundreds of videos trying to solve the lore of this thing. Fun fact, but as many of you know, I was actually a video editor over on Game Theory before FNAF first even started up. I was here where the first FNAF theories got made, though I somehow managed to avoid working on them until like 2020. I was pulling a Neo and dodging all those bullets, man. But that let me experience those theories as a fan, something most of the team didn't get to do. I also had the cool experience of creating a theory on the first movie when Matt was actually in that movie. He didn't tell me anything about it before that video came out, so the video wasn't really compromised, and he trusted me with that responsibility. But needless to say, my relationship with FNAF and theorizing about it's unique, which is why I'm happy to say that I'm really excited about Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Especially after the latest trailer dropped a couple weeks ago. I thought the first film was a good foundation for this series, a solid adaptation that did capture the heart of FNAF, but had area for improvement. But with this new trailer, dude, the budget bump is real. The sets, the costumes, the cinematography, everything is noticeably better. And the artists once again crushed it on the animatronic designs. Fun fact, the people who made those animatronics are actually the fine folks over at the Jim Henson Creature Shop. You probably know them best for their work on stuff like Sesame Street and The Muppets, and like the head that Deadmau5 used to wear, yeah, like the musician. We've been tracking this film every step of the way. We speculated about it using the first movie and its novelization. We tried to work out the entire plot after Scott released some maybe real, maybe fake script pages during the FNAF anniversary event, and we decoded the first teaser earlier this year. And now that we have this new full trailer, I want to continue the trend. I want to take everything we've seen up until now and see if this trailer shines a new light on that information. What else does this trailer tell us? What can we learn about the story of this new movie from the split-second shots and mysterious voiceover? Honestly, this is some of my favorite parts of theorizing. This new trailer both confirms and debunks some of our previous theories, which I think is awesome. They're keeping us on our toes, keeping us guessing, and we as a theorist community can have some real fun again, just digging into movie predictions. And real talk, but I think that this trailer legitimately changed where I thought this movie franchise was headed. So put on your Freddy masks and crank that music box, loyal theorists. We're jump scaring into this trailer. So going in here, I'm going to be trying to put these scenes together by group, trying to sort them into either where they go in the movie or by their narrative purpose. So cool? Cool. The first section of the trailer I want to cover involves what I'm going to call the Freddy Fazbear break-in. And it actually starts with the very first shot, where we get this blue van driving down a street during a rainy night. The license plate here reads out, "I see dead people," a fun little reference to The Sixth Sense. I see dead people. But another fun reference? Well, the van is basically identical to the one we see in Security Breach and in Secret of the Mimic. Now, I don't think that's really significant or anything like that. Secret of the Mimic takes place in the 70s, Security Breach in the 2020s, and we're pretty sure these movies are set in the early to mid 2000s, so it's just a fun reference. Anyway, we then see a group of characters led by a woman played by actress McKenna Grace step out of the van with flashlights, clearly looking to break into Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. She explains that this was the original Freddy's location, while the one we saw in the first film was a franchise location. Basically, it was an expansion of that brand. Funnily enough, this actually lines up with ancient theories we had about FNAF 2's restaurant being the original location all the way back when that game first released. That got jumbled by retcon after retcon, and it became really unclear over the years, but I guess this is Scott trying to really clean up the lore with the movieverse. Oh, and side note, but it's also really funny to me that McKenna Grace played a big part in the most recent Ghostbusters movie, and now she's here hunting ghosts elsewhere. Yeah, while I previously speculated that these characters might be some sort of school bullies that would be killed by the animatronics during the climax of the movie, that clearly isn't the case. I've seen it reported online that they're instead paranormal investigators, and though I haven't found a primary source confirming this, that does seem pretty on point to me. As an avid fan of cryptids, the paranormal and ghost hunting contents, they have all the sort of gear you'd expect. And it's also fun to see a professional Hollywood studio's take on this. Like, we see one of the men here holding a video camera filming everything inside of the restaurant, while McKenna Grace's character is holding an audio recorder. Obviously, Obviously, you'd want a video camera to capture evidence of ghosts and such, and it's commonly believed that audio recording equipment like this can more easily pick up noises from ghosts or other paranormal entities when they try to communicate than the human ear. This is probably why McKenna Grace asks,
"Do you guys hear that?"
and the others question what she's even talking about. It looks like she's the only one listening through headphones here, so she's probably the only one hearing stuff only picked up by the audio recorder. There's also some faint music box melody playing in the background here during this bit, which will become quite relevant in just a moment. That being said, I also don't see other equipment you'd typically find for these sort of ghost hunting crews. They don't have a spectrometer, an EMF meter, a thermal temperature reader, or even a Microsoft Kinect. Yeah, that piece of garbage is being used in ghost hunting now. Though if these films are supposed to be set in the early to mid 2000s, then I guess it would make sense that they wouldn't have a Kinect since that wasn't out yet. Oh, and just because I wanted to mention this, I did actually try to identify what type of camera this guy was using to see if I could pinpoint a model and year it was released. Basically trying to catch the filmmakers using stuff that wouldn't have existed at the time. But I just couldn't do it. I even brought on our live action producers and Tom, who's had experience working with cameras and TV, and they called this camera, quote, painfully generic. So, yeah. They even gaffed over the brand name on the camera. They put tape over it so you couldn't see it. You gotta make sure you're not giving anyone an unintentional brand deal, huh? Inside of the restaurant, we see a lot of FNAF imagery you would expect. We get a look at Freddy art on the floor, old merch in the form of plushies, a creepy shot of a worn down Balloon Boy statue, though notably not the animatronic Balloon Boy we saw in the first teaser, and most interestingly to me, a pirate ship. This wasn't really a thing in the FNAF 2 game, and if anything, this reminds me way more of the Pirate Cove area you could find in Security Breach. I'm not sure if that's going to end up meaning something significant for this movie, or if this is just another case of the film series being a giant blending of the most iconic parts of FNAF's imagery. Either way, the pirate ship is also in a big ball pit. Makes me wonder if this one also allows for time travel. Well, probably not, but I still can't believe that that's a real thing and has been a significant part of FNAF lore and come back up in recent games. Just never change FNAF. Elsewhere, we also get our first look at a sort of cave or tunnel looking area with water going through the tunnel. This is probably part of some boat attraction and is used for some pretty effective scares elsewhere in the trailer, but the thing I wanted to point out most here, well, if you look pretty closely at the walls and maybe up the brightness a bit, you'll see a bunch of figurines or plushies of the puppet. So this makes me wonder, is this part of the puppet's attraction, or is there some weird puppet cult going on here with all these plushies getting placed throughout the restaurant? This might also be a nod to the Night Marionette from Security Breach, who had plushies everywhere throughout the Pizzaplex, but that was more of an Easter egg that the community never really cracked or got a consensus on, but it's weird nonetheless. Now, speaking of the puppet, this is where we really start to get into the meat of the trailer. McKenna Grace's character finds a stairwell leading into a weird sub-basement area where she finds a giant present-looking box. There are gears all over the wall which start to spin, eventually opening the box as McKenna Grace looks up in terror. This, of course, is where the puppet animatronic comes into play here in the movie, and honestly, this setup is terrifying. I previously thought that this scene was going to be happening in the school as part of the third act climax, but clearly not, and this is way better. These investigators are taking the same role as Max and the hooligans who broke into the pizzeria in FNAF 1, showing off how dangerous these animatronics can be and that they can leave the restaurant, probably at the end of Act 1 or the middle of Act 2. McKenna Grace is getting taken out by the puppet here, and the other members of her ghost hunting crew are picked off one by the rest of the animatronics. And from the brief shot we get of Mangle on top of the van as it's driving away, it looks like at least one of the investigators will also briefly get away from the pizzeria before they're chased down and killed. It's brutal stuff, but necessary setup for this sort of horror film. You gotta have stakes for the main characters, know what I mean? So the next big set of scenes from this trailer are what I'm gonna call the home life section, involving Mike, Abby, and Vanessa just trying to live their best lives. For example, we get a sequence of Mike and Vanessa out at dinner. This is clearly a pretty nice restaurant, or maybe just an Olive Garden, it's kinda hard to tell. But either way, this is really giving the energy of a romantic date to me. Vanessa wonders if this is what being normal feels like, and Mike comments that they're both doing fine. They've been through a lot, and you know what? I agree. Not everyone gets stabbed by their serial killer dad. That's incredibly traumatic, and it looks like Vanessa is feeling some PTSD because of it. There's another shot of Vanessa laying on a bed, clutching her stomach, roughly where Afton stabbed her in the previous movie. She's probably thinking about that here, and given the lighting and color of the scene, scene? It looks like it's connected to that cool shot from the first teaser of Afton's spirit at the end of the hallway with all of the doors magically swinging open. I'm going to guess that this is part of a dream sequence and that she's actually having recurring nightmares about Afton. There's another scene where Vanessa looks exhausted as Springtrap's hand comes in and grabs her shoulder. Very obviously a CGI arm too. This seems directly connected with the scene from the first teaser of Vanessa pulling a gun, so she's probably hallucinating her father attacking her again and pulled a gun only to find nothing there. Oh, and just before we move on from Springtrap, there's another great scene of him running down a hallway. Again, this feels like a dream to me. I don't really think that Afton's gonna play a huge role in this particular story, but they probably wanted Matthew Lillard back for the name recognition and to set him up as the main antagonist for whatever they're gonna do for FNAF 3. Back to the restaurant, Vanessa asks about Abby and Mike says that she has good days and then days where she misses her ghostly friends. So right off the bat, that's interesting because the way this conversation is framed implies that Vanessa hasn't seen or talked to Mike and Abby for a while. Otherwise, why would she be asking about how Abby's doing? So this means that she and the Schmidts sort of went their separate ways for a bit, or that this isn't long after she got out of the hospital. We then see a shot of Abby building a little toy animatronic. This is a fun nod to the full-size toy animatronics we're going to be seeing elsewhere in the film. And it's also a bit of supporting evidence for our previous theory that someone has come in and bought the Freddy IP. I mean, Afton doesn't really seem like the type to be making deals with like Mattel or Hasbro to make these sorts of toys, and Abby certainly didn't build this and like cast the Chica shell out of plastic herself. Someone made and sold that toy. We also see that Abby still draws the animatronics a lot. I quite like that there's this cute little recreation of the scene where they all built like the fort and then laid on the ground inside of it together from the first movie. There's also a much darker drawing here of Abby along with either Golden Freddy or Original Freddy. It's kind of hard to tell, like the color's a little ambiguous, it is both ears, but it's also recreating a scene with Golden Freddy. Either way, this drawing is like evil looking. Is that implying that she has darker memories of that particular animatronic than she's letting on? But also interesting here is that these other drawings are of the toy animatronics, not the original ones. And there's a drawing here of Abby inside of a ship on the water. Perhaps the pirate ship we talked about earlier? So there are a couple of possibilities here. Either Abby has already visited the new location from this movie, and this scene is from later in the movie after she's drawn to the new animatronics, or they're somehow visiting her and invading her dreams, or something like that, trying to lure her to the new pizzeria. At this point, I don't really think we have enough information to outright say what's going on, but given the new animatronics seem to need the fast talker to communicate with Abby, I'm gonna guess the former option for now. Vanessa then says that
this story that you're gonna fix those animatronics is only giving her false hope.
This has a couple of interesting implications. First of all, are the animatronics broken? Did something happen? The restaurant from the first movie did kind of collapse as Afton was defeated, but most of the structure remained intact and we didn't really see any of the animatronics get hurt or broken. So maybe, like, someone broke in and damaged them, or they're not functioning for some other reason? Like, is Afton's spirit somehow hurting them in some other way? Or perhaps, as we previously speculated, whomever bought the FNAF franchise might have come in and taken parts from the FNAF 1 animatronics to put them in the toy animatronics. Maybe that's why they're broken. Either way, we know that Mike is trying to fix them, but either can't or is pretending that he can't. It's a fun conflict setup, which leads us to our third big group of scenes, the main characters and their interactions with the new animatronics. It starts here with Abby trying to talk with her ghostly friends through the fast talker toy.
Can any of you hear me?
At first she gets no answer, but later, at night, the fast talker lights up in Abby's room, and like we know this is Abby's room, just look at the drawings on the wall, and we do hear a voice coming through.
Help us, come find us, I will show you the way.
Just to get this out of the way, it looks like Mike and Abby may have moved into a nicer house that they're fixing up, or at least that's what's implied here because this house here in the trailer is not the same one from the first film. Anyway, the spirits are now communicating through the fast talker, and this directly connects with the shots we see of Abby riding up to the sister location from both this trailer and the first teaser. But something else big here? The voice says,
come find us.
Come find us. Remember, at the very end of the credits of the first movie, we hear the letters spelling out, come find me, all while the puppet's music box is playing. That implied that the puppet was asking Mike and Abby to find them. So, come find us here in the trailer is oddly similar, isn't it? So, the voice talking through the fast talker here, it isn't the original ghost. It's not Abby's friends. It's the puppet trying to lure her to the new pizzeria for some reason. Other scenes in this section of the trailer include a lot of what we've seen before or things close to it. The animatronics out and about, at the fair, in the neighborhood, at the school about to attack the character played by Wayne night, that sort of thing. There's also an ominous voice here saying,
"Where are you gonna want to? I'm not done with you."
So I couldn't immediately identify who this was supposed to be. Like, it doesn't really sound similar to Matthew Lillard and Afton to me, even though the dialogue does make me think of him. So not 100% on who this is supposed to be yet. I just don't think we have enough information. Either way, we also get our first look at the withered animatronics, Chica, Foxy, and Bonnie. Now these are, they're weird. Given what we've talked about here with the animatronics from the first movie potentially being stripped for parts, I did have the thought that maybe these are supposed to be those animatronics. So that would make sense why they're like broken down now. But that being said, they do look really different. I also asked Tom about this just to get his opinion, and he wasn't 100% sure if that could be the case. But just because they do look so different, he and I agreed that these are likely different robots. So that means we have 3 sets of animatronic characters at play here. The original FNAF 1 robots, the toy animatronics, and the withered ones. Man, this franchise got like really big really fast, huh? And finally, to round things out, we completely expected it, but Vanessa and Mike will be coming to visit the pizzeria at some point. There's an awesome shot of the pair getting approached by Balloon Boy in the water of the pizzeria's tunnel, and a couple of incredibly effective shots of the puppet stalking Vanessa. Honestly, those 2 shots have to be some of my favorites of the whole frickin' trailer. The fact that you can't see the puppet completely and that it's like out of focus, just chef's kiss, man. And of course, there's the money shot of Mike in the pizzeria's office with no doors. We hear the laugh of a child as animatronics close in on Mike. He looks down at a Freddy Fazbear mask and thinks,
"There's no way that'll work."
But he tries it anyway, and it does work. This is, of course, the main mechanic of the FNAF 2 video game. Here, you had to try to use a Freddy mask to try to trick the animatronics and their facial recognition child protection software to make them think that you were one of them so they'd leave you alone. Not sure how much of that will be in the actual movie beyond this one scene, but they had to include it somewhere, right? Otherwise, I mean, what would even be the point of adapting FNAF 2? Now, if you watched the trailer, you may have noticed that I've left a couple of things out so far. And hey, good eye, I did indeed strategically leave out a couple of moments and didn't dive into them specifically because it's really the key to the whole big plot of the movie. Why? Well, because of this line right here.
Some little girl got murdered here.
McKenna Grace's paranormal investigator mentions that a little girl was killed in this restaurant. And if you know anything about FNAF lore, this can only be pointing to one person, Charlie Emily. If you don't know, Charlie, or Charlotte, was the daughter of Henry Emily, Afton's business partner in the lore. Afton killed Charlie here at this original location. All of this is information we got from the FNAF 2 game. And beyond this verbal mention, I think we actually see Charlie in this trailer. During the climax, there's a split-second shot of a girl being attacked. This is the actress Audrey Lynn Marie, and though I haven't seen any official reporting on it, common speculation online is that she's playing Charlie. And I mean, she does have the look. She's a little girl with long brunette hair. Yeah, that checks out. And this even lines up with other evidence or questions that we have about this movie. For example, that voice we talked about earlier, the male one that I wasn't confident was Afton, that could be whatever actor they got to play Charlie's dad, Henry Emily. Plus, there's a shot of who I believe to be Springtrap looking at a little boy through a door's window, a boy that I couldn't really identify in a version of the pizzeria that is clearly well maintained. This is a flashback, which would line up with the timeline of Charlie's murder. So, more than likely, we're getting the full Charlie storyline here in the FNAF 2 movie, which lines up with the puppet. Yeah, Charlie was the spirit that possessed the puppet in the game, so she's probably doing so here too. Now, that does create a bit of a problem for us here on Film Theory though. See, Matt and I previously theorized that Garrett, Mike's little brother that Afton killed in the first movie, was going to be taking the place of Charlie and become the puppet in the film universe. And if Garrett isn't going to be the puppet, well, then that's a pretty big loose end that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. They will probably be addressing what happened to Garrett in this movie series. But if Garrett isn't going to be the puppet, then who's he going to be? Who is Mike's brother Garrett? What role is he going to play? What ghost is he going to be in this series? Well, though the trailer might have proven one old theory incorrect, another one might actually be right. In that breakdown last week, one of the big pieces we put together was that FNAF 2 is almost certainly going to feature a character named Charlie Emily, a little girl from the lore of the FNAF games who would go on to die and possess the puppet. The puppet is the big new scary animatronic in this movie, so it makes sense that Charlie's going to take that same role in the movieverse. But this creates a bit of a problem for us here at Theorist. See, Matt and I previously speculated that another character was going to be taking Charlie's place as the puppet. That theory is years old at this point, go check it out if you want a refresher, but I felt pretty confident in it until this new trailer. It just made sense to me that they were going to try to condense the characters in the film series series to try to make it simpler for a mainstream audience, but clearly that isn't the direction they're headed in for the series. What, a FNAF product being convoluted and confusing? No. And yet, Garrett is a massive loose end, a dangling thread that Scott and the filmmakers set up that would be really disappointing if they never paid off. So they're certainly going to bring him back into the story somehow. And the real question is, how are they going to do that? What character from the FNAF lore is Garrett going to pop up as? Well, loyal theorists, I think I figured it out. And this one's gonna leave you in tears. Get your fast talkers ready, loyal theorists. I want to get to the bottom of this one. So to figure out who Garrett is going to be, I want to start with a bit of a recap as to why he can't be the puppet in this new movie, and also layer on some other evidence here that I wasn't able to fit in last week. Basically, why is Charlie definitely the puppet, but not Garrett? Well, according to one of the new characters talking about the pizzeria in the trailer,
some little girl got murdered here.
A little girl I'm pretty sure we actually see screaming in the trailer. This is almost certainly pointing to a very specific character from FNAF lore, the aforementioned Charlie Emily, daughter of Afton's business partner, Henry Emily. Afton killed Charlie during his original murder spree, which appears to line up with what we see in the trailer. There's a shot of what looks like Springtrap looking at a little boy through a door's window in a cleaned up and brand new looking pizzeria. This is clearly a flashback. And Charlie being in this movie even lines up with the script pages Scott released during the FNAF 10-year anniversary. If you don't remember, Scott released 4 pages from the FNAF 2 movie script during the event, but the catch was that only one of them was real. After seeing the first teaser, the script page I think is the real one sees a man leading his children, Gemma and Darren, into a hidden room in the pizzeria. Honestly, the only thing going against this page was that it included a carousel with characters who might not even exist at this point. But, well, we see a carousel in the trailer, and though you can't make out which animals are on it, I wouldn't be surprised if there were cameos from those animatronic characters I originally wrote off. Anyway, this script page could now show Charlie and this little boy, the one that we see in the trailer, being led to their deaths as the cold open for the movie. Now, you may have also noticed that the names I mentioned on this page, Gemma and Darren, don't line up with the likes of Charlie or whatever, but that's actually a pretty common screenwriting trick. If a writer or studio want to keep the exact details of a role secret, like their identity, they'll often give the characters fake names during the scripting phase to hide those identities. For example, early in production and even in the auditions, the characters Rey and Finn from the Star Wars sequel trilogy were known as Kira and Sam, or Rachel and Thomas. So Gemma and Darren could be placeholder names for real characters like Charlie if Scott didn't want us to know that's where the story was going, especially if he was going to tease the page. Though I will just say, just quickly as an aside, this trailer did make me wonder about these pages again. See, in my very first theory I did about the script pages, I concluded that this one was actually the real one. It talked about haunted plushies and how they related to a book called The Velveteen Rabbit. Go check out that theory if you want more info there. In the end, I decided I was mistaken, and the other page we'd narrowed it down to is actually the correct one, but after seeing this trailer and noticing how prominent the plushies were in the restaurant, I did second guess myself, but no, I still think this other page is correct. Just wanted to point that out because 1, it's always fun to share our thought process with you guys, and 2, it's weird that there are so many plushies in this restaurant, right? I'm not crazy, right? So, okay, if Charlie is in this new movie, it only makes sense for her spirit to be one of the animatronics, the puppet. That's who she possessed in the games, and with both Charlie and the puppet being so front and center in this new movie, that's the only connection that makes logical sense. And, like I said earlier, that's a huge problem for us here at Theorist, because we were previously sure that Garrett was going to be the puppet instead. I mean, we had a whole freaking theory about it. It made sense at the time, especially since we speculated that Mike's dad could be the movie's version of Henry Emily, so Garrett would be taking Charlie's place. And we thought that the dad would be Henry Emily for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Afton recognized Mike's name, and that's why he actually got the job at the pizzeria in the first place. And 2, we thought the actor playing a worker tinkering with an animatronic in the training video Mike watched looked kind of like the actor playing his father. Sadly, in retrospect, neither of those things are as hard evidence as we would have liked. That worker actually ended up being a cameo from an employee of the Jim Henson Creature Shop, the people who make the animatronics in real life, and Afton could have just recognized the name of one of his victims. It didn't need to be because he worked with Mike's dad. So, okay, if Garrett isn't going to be the spirit controlling the puppet, is he just not going to be showing up again? That wouldn't make a ton of narrative sense. He's a huge part of Mike's backstory and a giant dangling thread. No, he's going to show up again. So, who is he going to be when he does? What ghost is is Garrett going to become? Well, there is one spirit that he could fit perfectly into, someone from the games that Garrett could embody and create a satisfying narrative, helping to resolve Mike's arc, the Afton storyline, and finish out the trilogy in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. And who is that? Well, loyal theorists, Garrett is going to be the FNAF movie universe's version of the Crying Child. Now, before we really get into this, we should probably level set real quick, because while I know a lot of us are really in the weeds with FNAF and its lore, if you're just here for the movies, or if you're a newer fan, you might hear something like The Crying Child and think, huh? So let me give you a bit of a rundown. The Crying Child was a character that appeared in the retro arcade-style minigames from the Five Nights at Freddy's 4 video game. These were like a little story within a story, giving us details on the backstory of the FNAF universe and its characters. These sorts of games were where we learned a lot of details about like the purple guy and his murders to begin with, and where most of the story of the Crying Child is told. So, who is the Crying Child? Well, we aren't actually sure what his name is, and that was a huge mystery in the fanbase for years. It's still never been confirmed, but the best explanation I've seen comes from Hyperdroid's theory on the subject, suggesting that it's David. But more importantly, regardless of his first name, we do know his last name, Afton. Yep, he was one of William Purple Guy Afton's children. He was also absolutely terrified of the animatronics his father built, which honestly, I mean, fair, look at these things. Anyway, the Crying Child's older brother Michael knew this, and he decided to play a prank on the Crying Child at the Crying Child's very own birthday party. Michael and a bunch of his friends took the Crying Child and put his head inside of the jaws of the Fredbear animatronic, and well, you can guess the rest.
Was that the bite of 87?
No, actually that was the bite of 83, which also, hey, it's funny and weird that there were two big events revolving around an animatronic biting someone, but you know, whatever, 2 nickels and all that. Now already, right here, we have some thematic connections to Garrett from the first movie. Like, first off, the Crying Child's brother, Michael Afton, he felt incredibly guilty for the death and wanted to make amends for it, eventually becoming the playable character from the very first FNAF game. The alias he took for that job, Michael Schmidt. Yeah, Michael Afton is already the basis for Mike from the movies. Just to be clear, I am not saying that I think Mike from the movie is secretly an Afton, or that Garrett is like secretly Afton's son that he then kidnapped and then killed. The FNAF franchise can be convoluted and confusing, but not that convoluted and confusing. But the thematic parallels are clear here. Both Michael and Mike feel guilty for the deaths of their brothers, the Crying Child and Garrett. Both were killed because of Afton, though one more directly than the other, and that drove the Mikes to want to get some sort of redemption. So if Scott is using the same sort of long-term motivations for both characters, movie Mike is going to want to continue seeking that redemption for the loss of Garrett. Not for literally getting his head crushed, but you know, it's thematically similar. And the best way he's going to be able to do that is if Garrett becomes the Crying Child. Now, that's most of what we know for sure about the Crying Child, but that doesn't mean there isn't some strong beliefs about him in the community thanks to all of the awesome FNAF theorists throughout the years. And honestly, if Scott decided to go with even a percentage of these theories as the movie's canon, Garrett's story in the FNAF films could be incredible. One of the longest running theories we've had here on the channels was that there wasn't just one spirit inside of Golden Freddy, but instead 2. The first was a vengeful spirit, one that wanted revenge for everything done to them. But the other one was the Crying Child, who was less angry. There was a ton of evidence for this that we covered over years, involving like the numbers of eyes lighting up and Golden Freddy acting weird, and it's a lot. We'd be here for ages if I tried to recap all of it. Honestly, I just recommend going on a nostalgia trip and binging through some of those old game theories. Either way, the idea of 2 kids being inside of a ghostly animatronic like Golden Freddy is an idea that the franchise picked up elsewhere. It's not just a fan theory. For example, in the Fazbear Frights book series, we meet the Stitch Wraith, who has the souls of both a vengeful spirit and a crying child inside of it. To be clear, this isn't the same animatronic as Golden Freddy, and these aren't the same spirits. These are characters named Jake and Andrew, but they are all clearly supposed to be stand-ins for the game franchise version of Golden Freddy. Regardless, the filmmakers have laid the groundwork that they need to introduce a second spirit to Golden Freddy in the films. First off, the blonde kid who's possessed Golden Freddy in the movies very much fits the mold of a vengeful spirit. After Afton is defeated, he looks on as his body and soul are tortured by the Golden Bonnie Springlock suit, almost giddy at it. And he also wants to kill Abby and have her join the other animatronics. It's very vengeful spirit coded, so they have that aspect of Golden Freddy if they wanted to expand it with the crying child half. And a design detail that they carried into the movies was that Golden Freddy only has one functioning eye, similar to some imagery from the character that led us to believe that the crying child was in there to begin with. A really easy way for them to subtly hint that the movie Golden Freddy also has these two warring spirits inside of it would be to have the other eye socket either light up, or if the weird spirit apparition that is Golden Freddy's body randomly manifests with both eyes, each with its own color, or something like that. You know, this is actually kind of funny because way back before the first FNAF movie came out and we did our prediction theory, the one that I wrote completely solo because Matt knew all of the secrets, well, I predicted that Garrett would actually end up becoming Golden Freddy instead of the blonde kid from the movie, who would instead become the cupcake. Not my best prediction, I must admit, but hey, you can't win them all. Anyway, that kid ended up being that vengeful spirit inside of Golden Freddy, so there's a chance that at least part of this initial prediction could end up being true, with Garrett becoming the crying child half of Golden Freddy. It's always weird how theories can end up coming around again, just with a slightly different point of view on it. So, okay, Garrett will almost certainly be the crying child. So where does that leave us with the story of the FNAF movie series and where Garrett will fit into it? Well, for FNAF 2, I don't really expect it to have any huge changes. This movie already has a lot going on with Charlie and the puppet and the toy animatronics and all of that jazz. Like, we might get a post-credit scene or another teaser in the credits, but it's not going to be something huge, you know? Nah, the real impact here is going to be on the third FNAF movie. Pretty consistently, we've predicted that the series is going to keep getting bigger and bigger with the threats that the characters face, with FNAF 3 likely bringing in a lot of story elements from Security Breach, introducing the Pizzaplex as the third big location for Mike, Abby, and Vanessa to explore, and the Glam Rocks as the new animatronics in the story. But now I'm less certain about that. See, behind the scenes in recent months, Blumhouse, the production company behind the FNAF movies, started really struggling. Several of their other movies have been really big misfires, the most recent one being Megan 2.0. Like, it's boring movie business stuff, but that movie really bombed and impacted their bottom line. If the first movie is any indication, FNAF 2 is probably going to do pretty well for them. And in classic horror movie Hollywood fashion, Blumhouse is probably going to want to stretch this franchise out. And an easy way for them to do that right off the bat? Well, don't introduce more Security Breach stuff yet. That can be saved for future FNAF movies. Maybe FNAF 4 where they could do a soft reboot with a new main cast, letting them explore the Security Breach era of stories as its own trilogy. And if that's the case, then it makes the most sense to bring Garrett and the Crying Child storyline back in to round out this trilogy of FNAF movies. So if that's the plan, how are they going to do that? So what's the story going to be? Well, while diving deep into the mini games for FNAF 4 for this theory, a couple of quotes from the Crying Child really stuck out to me. Specifically, "We are still your friends, and I will put you back together," both from Night 6. Do these lines sound familiar to you? Like something similar to what Mike's doing in the movies?
Some days she misses her friends.
This story that you're gonna fix those animatronics?
Obviously, the ghostly children in the movies and the games are both referred to as friends, but more importantly, Mike is trying to fix the animatronics. One could say that he's trying to put them back together so they can find peace and move on. And I bet I even know how he's going to do it. While we don't know a ton for sure about the Crying Child, something we do know for sure he was involved with in the games, the happiest day ending, or basically the good ending of the FNAF 3 video game. The long story short here, well, in the happiest day minigame, it's the Crying Child's birthday again. But instead of being bullied and accidentally killed by his brother, the Crying Child basically gathers all of the souls of Afton's other victims and celebrates his birthday. He has the party he never got to have in life, giving the souls some modicum of peace and letting them pass into the afterlife. Well, all of the spirits except for Charlie, for some reason, like it more or less actually says that exactly in the character encyclopedia. Like, Charlie didn't move on because, I don't know, man, for some reason. Honestly, kind of hilarious. So, using that info, because he's trying to help fix the animatronics, to help Abby's friends, Mike is going to be the one to help put them back together. He's going to be the one to help them have their happiest day in FNAF 3, helping them celebrate whatever birthday they never got. He'll be the big brother to Garrett he never had the chance to be. And in doing so, along with protecting these kids, and Abby, and Vanessa from Afton's evil spirit, Mike is going to help release them from the purgatory they're trapped in with these pizzerias. He's gonna help these spirits move on and find peace. Well, at least until they find the next group of haunted animatronics animatronics, these things are multiplying like rabbits in this franchise. So at this point, you know what Five Nights at Freddy's is. We're almost in the double digits of videos about it here on Film Theory, let alone the dozens and dozens over at our sister location Game Theory. The first movie was a huge hit, and the sequel, coming this December, looks like it's continuing the trend and adapting some of the best parts of the Five Nights franchise while also bringing in a lot of new ideas for the series. Honestly, I'm kind of excited about that. Like, if you're gonna be making an adaptation of something in a different medium, use the unique ways of storytelling in that medium to add ideas while keeping to the spirit of that original IP. Anyway, because the new movie is coming out really soon, December 5th, one final trailer released 1 month ahead of that, in the middle of a Wednesday while I was working on something else. The script for the 10th anniversary video on Film Theory, actually. Man, FNAF, it's making me delay that until January, just... How on brand for Theorist is that? Apparently, this trailer was leaked, in that an unlisted copy was uploaded and sleuthy fans found it before they were supposed to. I have to wonder if that forced their hand or if they always meant for this to come out on the 5th, but who knows at this point. So of course, I had to drop what I was doing to try to break down this trailer, since we've done it for every other one in this franchise. It's kind of like an ongoing series for us here on Film Theory. Anyway, loyal theorists, this trailer was interesting. Why? Well, I was shocked with just how much they showed here. Like, if you dig into what they show and the meaning of what's on screen, they answered a lot of questions that have lingered in the fan base for years at this point. It makes me really excited for what this film is gonna do when it's fully released. But for now, let's break down this trailer to see what secrets are hiding in its animatronic endoskeleton, shall we? Grab your flashlights, friends, as we're going into this haunted pizzeria. So we start with the shot of Vanessa waking up and Mike asking her about her dreams on their little date night from previous trailers.
So you wanna tell me about your bad dreams?
We then hop to a sequence where we see a young Vanessa running through her house as she's haunted by a vision of her father, William Afton. I speculated earlier that shots like this with Afton in this house were either a dream or a ghost, so I guess that's confirming that we are in a dream. We then see Vanessa hiding in this dream in a closet or under a bed or something, and a little bit later we see Afton grab a knife in this dream similar to the one that he uses as Spring Bonnie. If they are legitimately trying to give us an origin story for this knife or why he uses a knife, I'm gonna lose it in theaters. In the present, Vanessa opens a closet in her apartment or house or whatever and pulls out a box clearly full of stuff from her childhood. And guys, we finally know what's in the box. Real talk though, this box looking similar to the mysterious one from the games had to be intentional or at least a fun nod. I see you, Scott. I see you. Anyway, the next shot is Vanessa putting out a bunch of toys almost as if she's displaying them. There's some marbles, a small book, what looks like a little mirror, and Garrett's plane. Yeah, you know, Mike's little brother murdered by Afton, the toy plane that he had in the first movie that we know was given to Vanessa. I have to wonder, are these all things from her childhood or maybe something darker? Like, were these items taken from Afton's victims and given to Vanessa like the plane was? That would be incredibly creepy and just totally in line with this franchise, man. And I also have to ask, why is she displaying them here? Like it could be that she's trying to get through things emotionally or confront those bad memories, but maybe she's trying to summon a spirit, like the spirits of these kids, or maybe of her father. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense or if it would work with this story, but it did come to me and I wanted to share that idea. Over all of this, we hear Mike say,
"We're never gonna be able to move forward until you deal with some of the mess you left in your head."
This is interesting because it sounds a lot like what Vanessa was dealing with in Help Wanted and that whole era, where Glitch Trap was a sort of AI infecting her brain and all of that jazz. But instead of using the weird new era stuff with AI and making it all confusing, we're just using a lot of the paranormal reasoning from the earlier, simpler, and frankly more popular parts of the franchise as a jumping off point. Again, this is just another example of taking stuff that worked from every era of the Freddy's IP and smushing it into these movies. Next up, we cut to a scene of Mike talking to a man, looking over various pictures and newspaper clippings regarding Afton, a little girl, the pizzeria, and the murders. And let me tell you, when I saw this scene, I got super excited because clearly this guy is supposed to be Henry Emily, Afton's business partner from the game franchise and father of Charlie Emily, the girl that possesses the puppet in the games who we believe will do the same here in the movies. There are plenty of reasons that this guy is Henry. Like, first off, he has a picture of a girl we've identified as Charlie in his notes, and it looks like the sort of school photo or professional portrait that you'd only really expect a parent to have of their child. And it's accompanied with a little note note that reads, "Daddy, I am really sorry you missed my birthday, but I really love my present." Again, that's the sort of thing a parent would have from their kid and keep in a scrapbook like this. But the meta reason I am positive that this guy is Henry Emily, well, it's because he's being played by the actor Skeet Ulrich. If you don't know, Ulrich is an actor with a lot of history in weird, supernatural, or adjacent film and television. He had a main role in Riverdale for years, he was a jerky jock in The Craft, and most importantly for us, he was also the boyfriend character Billy in Scream. That's significant for a couple of reasons, mostly that Billy turned out to be the Ghostface killer in Scream, and that he wasn't working alone. Billy committed those crimes with his best friend Stu, played by none other than Matthew Lillard. They were friends and partners in crime in that movie, and given how much of a face Lillard has become for Afton in the FNAF series, I absolutely see the studio and filmmakers getting Ulrich for the part of Henry Emily, Afton's business partner, as a nod to Scream and a bit of stunt casting that horror fans would love. And to be clear, this is not me saying that Henry in the film is like a co-conspirator in all of Afton's murders or anything like that, only that they were partners in making the animatronics. Now, talking about this actual moment in the trailer, there are lots of small details I wanted to mention and break down because they're eyebrow-raising at the very least. First of all, the shirt Charlie is wearing in this photo has black and white stripes, once again driving home the puppet aesthetic. And secondly, her note talks about a present, which again is a nod to the puppet. The puppet animatronic comes out of a present, and the night she went missing in the games, it was because she was locked out of a birthday party. Like really, they're just hitting the nail on the head over and over again that Charlie is going to be the puppet, and it's very on brand. Next, the note also says, "I miss our park," before getting cut off because it's folded over. This is a bit weird. At first I thought it might be referencing FNAF 1 where Garrett went missing in that movie. Like maybe it was a pattern for Afton that he took kids in parks, but that falls apart for a couple of reasons I'll get to shortly. So perhaps this park is a reference to the theme park of the Fall Fest that we see later in the trailer. It's just a thought anyway. We also get a little news article here about William Afton's early ambitions. This is more or less a puff piece, but it does talk about how Afton was a genius with animatronics and continued experimenting with new ways of making them. This is definitely pointing towards his work with Remnant and trapping souls in the animatronics. It's also strange that Henry is not as big of a focus here because we thought Afton was the business guy in their partnership and Henry was more the animatronic guy. But this is letting us know that, sure, maybe Henry knew his way around animatronics, but Afton was also an animatronic guy. But okay, all of that is neat or whatever, but the big thing we learn here, and the thing that made me and Tom light up like animatronic Christmas trees, this line right here.
It wasn't until years later when those 5 children went missing that I knew she was murdered.
So this might just seem like a normal trailer line, but this is actually huge. Why? Well, it confirms that Charlie died first before the other murdered kids. This was something we were pretty sure about for a while thanks to the books. Like Charlie died in 1983, and thanks to the Silver Eyes trilogy and Into the Pit, we knew that the other kids died in 1985. But then Help Wanted 2 came out and threw all of that into question. In that game, there are a set of gravestones you need to interact with for one of the endings, and if you light the graves in a certain order, you get a collectible. And to do that, the puppet's grave was the one you lit last, implying that she died last, and throwing everything we knew into question. So this right here is absolutely an example of Scott using these movies to set the record straight, and man, I'm so here for it. After all of us here at Theorist and in the FNAF theorizing community struggled for so long to get straight answers, it's so satisfying to finally have some. Next, we then cut to Charlie, tears running down her face, screaming as she holds a boy in her arms. We're definitely in the pizzeria back when it was at its peak here, given that we see a birthday party sort of situation going on. This whole sequence seems to be a continuation of another shot from an earlier trailer where we see this same boy in the pizzeria as Afton in the Spring Bonnie outfit peeks through a door to look at him. So a couple of thoughts here, like did Charlie just witness this kid almost get murdered and that's why she's crying? Or maybe, giant swing here, but are they both already dead? Yeah, probably not. Everyone is looking at her when she screams, but it would be a cool Sixth Sense type of reveal if when she puts the kid down we see like a stab wound or something. But more importantly than that, I'm pretty sure that this is right before Charlie is killed. Earlier in the trailer, Henry says this.
Everyone called it an accident.
Everyone called it an accident. And here we see Charlie standing on a little platform. If I were to guess, this is where the puppet would come out during performances. Oh, and also, again, they're emphasizing the stripes on her sleeves here. Love how consistent that is. So putting the pieces together here, this platform is likely a trap door, and she's about to fall through and into the machinery of the puppet animatronic. Something everyone would think was an accident. Notice how the other kid is suspiciously not on this platform when it focuses on Charlie's feet. It's about to open up and have Charlie fall to her death. Oh, and bonus points, that would make things way less confusing than it was in the game, since that had the puppet like find Charlie outside. It was very strange, and it follows the film's running mission statement of taking the recognizable parts of FNAF and simplifying them for the mainstream. We then get a lot of shots that just feel like classic horror movie fare that don't really add anything to our breakdown of the movie. We see a kid at Abby's school asking if she's ever gonna go back to Freddy Fazbear's, and then cut to her going back there. The animatronics wake up, and we see Mike and Vanessa in the pizzeria reacting to Balloon Boy's laugh coming from somewhere in its depths. Oh, and we also hear someone say,
"Where are you gonna run to?"
That's a line repeated from an earlier trailer. Back then I wasn't 100% sure who was saying this, but now it definitely sounds like it's from Afton. Oh, and also I have to point out, we can clearly see the carousel here in this shot with the 4 animals that you would expect: Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, and Chica. None of the extra animals mentioned on the potentially real script pages that Scott released during the 10th anniversary event. And man, at this point, it feels like Scott is just toying with me. Why are you doing this to me, man? Is checking the carousel for animals gonna be my version of counting animatronic tones? We then see the toy animatronics out and about like they've been really hammering home in the marketing for this movie. They even have a line saying,
"Half of this town will be dead by morning,"
letting us know just how much the stakes have been raised here. We see Freddy at the Fall Fest Fair thing, Matthew Patrick raising a knife sharpener from a knife block about to stab a woman, Megan Fox chasing the guy from Jurassic Park inside of a school supply room, and Balloon Boy creeping on a Freddy security guard who should be played by Markiplier. Come on, Mark, I know you're busy. Congrats on the wedding, by the way, but the fans really want to see you in these movies. And the last thing of note here, but we see the withered animatronics wake up and various jump scare shots of them, including Mangle attacking a car with Vanessa inside. In a previous trailer, we see them attacking the van with the paranormal investigators, so it looks like attacking vehicles will be their MO here in this movie. Or at the very least, he does it twice. Huh, weird. I just found 2 nickels. Something else I wanted to point out though is that none of the withered animatronics we see here in the movie have red eyes, though basically all of the toy animatronics have them at one point or another. To me, this pretty much confirms that the toy animatronics have a sort of child protection software that we mentioned in previous theories, and the withered animatronics don't. Those red eyes represent the software coming online and having them kill random people. This does make me wonder though, if the toys are just robots that seem to be corrupted, perhaps the withered are connected with the spirits from the first movie, or new spirits entirely? It's just a thought. Now, those are the broad strokes of the trailer, and most of our learnings from it, but of course, it's a FNAF trailer, and there's deeper meanings to be found here. And probably the most important thing that I picked up from this trailer was that it really seems like this movie is going to be answering a lot of questions that the series has asked for a long time. When young Vanessa is having this scary dream about her dad in the trailer, we see a bunch of images of a workshop. There's a bunch of animatronic equipment, as well as like medical tools you might find in a doctor's office or hospital or whatever. Now, there's a lot of dust on this medical equipment, so if you ask me, this actually isn't connected to the dream at all. This is something I think the characters are going to find in the present day, and it just like matched the tone for the rest of the trailer, so you know, they pulled trailer trickery and shoved that together, but that's neither here nor there. No, the big thing I wanted to focus on here was this. We see designs for a Freddy Fazbear animatronic on some old paper. Of course, you know us. When something like this pops up on screen, I absolutely had to pour over to see if there was any new information we could glean from it. And oh boy, don't you know that there was. You see up here where it says that this is Freddy 3.0, that it's a new design? Well, that's significant because if you compare this against all the other Freddy animatronics we see in the film series, this lines up most with the Freddy Fazbear from the first movie. The main Freddy, the classic Freddy, not the withered or the toy Freddy designs. You can really tell if you compare the jaw designs for the blueprint, classic Freddy, toy Freddy, and withered Freddy. This is definitely referring to the original Freddy from the first movie. And that's significant because, well, for a long time we weren't sure if the withered animatronics and the classic animatronics were the same animatronics or not. And that created a lot of confusion and ambiguity in the timeline and the story. But this right here is saying very clearly on paper that they are different. Most likely that the toy and withered animatronics came first and that the classic animatronics came later. And that's just from this one shot from one of these teasers. Who knows what answers the full movie's gonna give us? This might seem like I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. Like, this isn't really that big a deal, right? But this is really emblematic of not only this movie series as a whole, but honestly, where the entire FNAF franchise is right now. Here, check this. Looking at the writing credits of a lot of the major FNAF projects over the last few years, you'll notice a little bit of a trend. For Security Breach, Scott wasn't really credited as a writer, and that's probably why the story was a bit frustrating both for us and for Scott. After that, neither the DLC for Ruin or Help Wanted 2 had credited writers, but the first movie had Scott, Seth Cuddyback, and Emma Tammy, the director of the movie, all as writers. And in more recent projects, well, Scott was the main writer along with Steel Wool co-founder Jason Topolsky on Secret of the Mimic. And Scott is the only writer on this new FNAF 2 movie. And what that tells me is that Scott is trying to take the story of FNAF back. He's trying to claw back control over this franchise and this narrative to make it the way he wants it to be. To go back and tell these stories in a way that's more crystal clear and planned out, because he was kind of flying by the seat of his pants when this series originally came out. And with these movies, he's taking that opportunity to make it crystal clear, all while giving us more than a little bit of fan service along the way. Like, for real, did you see Toy Chica? What are we doing here, man?
You do realize that lunch is the most important meal of the day.
Thought it was breakfast.
Some people say that, but you know, it's just a theory.
There's something about this Ness guy that I really like. Let's check out what he has to say, shall we? Hello, Internet! Welcome to Food Theory, the most important meal of the day. Now, like I alluded to in the cold open, today we're tossing breakfast onto the proverbial frying pan to see if it can stand the heat. If you aren't up on the latest movie releases, you might want to check this one out. This thing has taken box offices by storm. It's called Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, the inexplicable success of this movie might be coming from the fact that it's based on a wildly successful video game franchise that's played and watched by tens of millions of people. Or, more likely, it's probably because of the cameo of this alarmingly good-looking waiter. During his 9 seconds on screen, this guy, probably the next Tom Cruise or something, takes a controversial stance that lunch is in fact the most important meal of the day, not breakfast. So, is he right? What actually is the most important meal of the day based on science? Well, to get to the bottom of this one, we have to look at everything from food history to human physiology. Let me tell you, the truth isn't as simple as some cereal commercials make it sound. In reality, this whole thing is steeped in conspiracy, fear-mongering, and bacon. Lots and lots of bacon. So in order to decide what the most important meal of the day is, the first thing that I'd like to know is where the phrase actually comes from. Was it the brainchild of some marketing team trying to trick your mom into buying Pop-Tarts? Is it actually based on some form of science? Who was in fact the first person to actually say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day? Well, the answer is a couple of random guys coming about 100 years ago. In a classic case of pseudo-scientist said something one time and we all believe it, the idea of breakfast being the most important meal of the day started with Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, the guy who invented cornflakes. Yeah, Kellogg, like the cereal brand. Before he came along, breakfast consisted of leftovers from the night before, and it was mostly seen as exactly what the name suggested, a light meal to start your day, to break your fast from overnight. In came Kellogg at the beginning of the 1900s, who really didn't like the diet Americans found themselves eating. He was a staunch advocate of a bland food diet to improve health and physical fitness. No spices, no elaborate cooking methods, basically no flavor. And honestly, to his credit, Kellogg was way ahead of his time in understanding that the bacteria in your gut influences your total health. This was revolutionary at the turn of the 20th century. Sadly though, he was also a big fan of very unsavory topics like segregation and eugenics. So let's just say that his judgment as a medical professional was a wee bit flawed. He believed that in order to preserve your gut bacteria and be healthy, you should eat only extremely bland foods, never drink, never smoke, and also be completely abstinent. You might have heard the rumor kicking around that Kellogg invented cornflakes as a way to stop kids from masturbating, and that rumor is absolutely true. That's why he did it. When Food Theory creative director Santi was researching this episode, no joke, apparently when he was a kid, people told him that cornflakes were originally meant to be put under the mattress so that kids wouldn't be tempted to do anything to make them crunch on their bed, if you know what I mean, because someone could hear them and then promptly shame them. That one's apparently not true, but the legends around this stuff are unreal. Suffice it to say, part of the marketing strategy for these cornflakes was to amp up the importance of a boring breakfast so people would be healthy and less sinful. This was the first step in breakfast's popularity snapping, crackling, and popping off. Let's look at the movement that officially locked in breakfast as the most important meal of the day. You see, See, that actually came from Sigmund Freud, or actually Sigmund Freud's nephew. Sigmund Freud's nephew was a public relations manager named Edward Bernays, and he's the biggest reason that we associate the most important meal of the day with the massive food fests that are served up everywhere from Denny's to the Four Seasons. Edward Bernays worked on PR in the 1920s for a company called Beechnut, who was trying to find ways of selling more of its bacon and ham products. I'm sure you can already see where this one's going. Good old Eddie hatched a plan to make people want to buy bacon by telling them that their doctors wanted them to do it. At the time, his PR agency had a doctor on staff for reasons, and Bernays posed a question to him. Wouldn't people have more energy if they ate more in the morning instead of just cereal and coffee? The doctor, who again was on staff at this PR agency, said, yeah, people burn calories when they sleep, so they would probably benefit from having a little bit more in the morning to help recover some of those lost calories. Literally, the premise of this whole thing was you burn calories while sleeping, and by eating in the morning, you recover some of those calories. So then Bernays had this doctor, who remains unnamed in almost every article or book he's ever mentioned in, write to 5,000 other physicians basically asking, hey, do you agree that the body burns calories overnight and that eating a hearty breakfast could potentially recover those calories? And 4,500 of them responded with a, well, yeah, because they were basically just asking, if you burn calories, do you put calories back in your body by eating more? When asked what would make a hearty breakfast, many of the physicians referenced bacon and eggs, and from there, the story wrote itself. Bernays claimed that a hearty breakfast prominently featuring bacon was medically based. It worked like a charm, and lo and behold, today 70% of bacon is eaten at breakfast, and the meal became so ubiquitous with health and a good day that no one ever stopped to think twice. In short, the nephew of Freud slipped this one right past us. So where then does that leave us? The idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day isn't and has never been based on human physiology or any actual science. The breakfast that we know today is literally hundreds of years of marketing ploys designed to get you, me, your parents, and their parents to buy stuff, and it has worked like a charm. But the unanswered question still remains. What is the most important meal of the day? Oh boy, let me tell you, when you start down the road researching this one, it gets complicated in a hurry. Not because of some crazy science, but instead because of the terminology. In a bizarre twist, the history of the human race has seen basically every meal called by every name of every other meal at some point. Let me just take you on a quick crash course to show you exactly what I mean. Breakfast is the compound word for breaking your fast, referring to whatever the first thing you eat is after having not eating or fasting all night. So whenever you eat your first meal of the day, that's technically your breakfast, which is going to be important to remember, so hang on to that little bit of info. In the olden days, before electricity, humankind timed all their activities based on the availability of light. When it's light, we wake up, we start doing things. When it's dark, we go to bed. Because of the need to do things during the day, people would wake up, get stuff done, then eat their most substantial food in the middle of the day when they could see the food and prepare and cook it, and then finish doing their activities and go to sleep with the sun. There are records of this pattern going all the way back to Roman times. You know all those frescoes of Romans eating grapes on a couch? Yeah, that wasn't some late night bacchanal supper club. That was happening at like 1 in the afternoon in broad daylight. When the Western world transitioned to Christianity, the Catholic Church actively discouraged people from eating in the morning before attending morning mass, because eating before attending mass was considered gluttony, one of the 7 deadly sins. This tradition is actually carried over in a lot of Catholic countries to this day, where it's still somewhat frowned upon to eat breakfast before going to church on Sundays. Okay, so people started off having breakfast as their midday meal. Does that then count as breakfast or lunch then? You can see we already have ourselves a problem here. Historically, breaking your fast or eating breakfast had nothing to do with eating in the morning, because it made sense to eat your largest meal at the middle of the day, known as lunch. Or is it? Because here's a new twist. What we see as lunch today was historically known as dinner. Yeah, it gets even more confusing. Before the Industrial Revolution, most work was done in individually owned shops or farms, where it was customary to take a larger break in the middle of the day to eat at home, just like we talked about originating from the Roman days. This home-based meal was usually a large, hot meal that would be your biggest, which is why in places like the UK, the midday meal is still often called this. In a lot of places, the midday meal was so substantial that it was customary to take a nap, which is where we get the common practice of a midday rest. If you've ever spent time in countries like Italy, Spain, or Greece, you'll have come across siesta or riposo, times where workers and shopkeepers close up, eat, and then take themselves a nap. In more rural areas, these still absolutely exist and can last upwards of 3 hours, giving people plenty of time to recharge during what we would now consider to be the mid-afternoon slump. So But why don't we still do this? Well, this main breakfast, dinner, lunch that people have been eating for thousands of years was upended in the 1800s by a little fad called the Industrial Revolution. This thing changed people's normal eating and sleeping patterns, all in the name of productivity. Suddenly, people started to have timed and regulated work days, so breakfast became more of a necessity for anyone wanting to make it through the day, or at least make it until they got to their mandated lunch break. Electricity meant that people were no longer setting their clocks by the sun, instead they were setting them by the clock. This made the what the heck do we call this meal problem worse. People were breaking their fast much earlier than before, eating a light lunch or dinner during the time of day that they had to eat their heaviest meal, and then coming home and eating the newly coined supper. Supper is a funny meal, because it started out as a light snack while you played games or read a book before bed, not designed to be heavy or substantial in any way. Over time, the upper class started to have more and more elaborate suppers, and throw in larger and more involved supper parties for their friends and colleagues, which grew supper into the elaborate circus that we now know as a multi-course dinner. This last meal of the day is so important to us here in the West that we don't even recognize how recently it was added to the docket of meals. To add insult to injury, the idea of supper was actually popularized by a midnight snack, a very specific snack eaten by none other than the Earl of Sandwich every night before his bedtime. He would ask his staff to make him his newly invented snack, the sandwich, late at night, which means that what we now consider to be the most popular lunch food in the US started off as a snack eaten closer to midnight than noon. TLDR, you can't name breakfast or lunch or even dinner as the most important meal of the day because they've all been called by each other's names for centuries. Despite all our efforts, we're foiled yet again when it comes to naming a meal that's the best because all the names are ultimately meaningless. So now we turn to the last bastion of hope to find ourselves the best meal, actual physiological science. I promised that it would be in here, but I had to show you why this is literally our only option. There are a lot of quote-unquote science facts about meals out there, and a lot of them are unfortunately not facts at all, so let's just debunk a couple of the key ones. First is the question of breakfast being important because it jumpstarts your metabolism. We've all heard this, but studies don't really support the claim. And this is found in reputable journals like the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, as well as several obesity-focused journals. Studies showed that people who skipped breakfast didn't have any differences in metabolism so long as they got the right amount of food later on in the day. And skipping breakfast didn't lead to any significant weight gain or loss over time in studies of hundreds of different patients. But I hear you saying, doesn't breakfast make you more full during the day and thereby help you eat less later on? Surprise, surprise! No. In a meta-analysis, studies found that this breakfast urban legend doesn't hold any water. A study from Harvard Medical School published that those that had breakfast actually consumed more calories than those that skipped breakfast. For many, eating breakfast was pretty far apart from lunch, so they felt hungry all over again by midday, and then again at dinner time. This is sort of a double-edged sword and comes down to the individual, because if you skip breakfast, you might feel more hungry later on, and thereby overindulge with your other meals, which researchers in the previous studies have also found. I also want to heavily couch all of this in the idea that you should always be eating enough food for your body, all bodies are different, and that all bods are beautiful bods. Skipping meals is something that all of us have done at some point or another because of a variety of different reasons, but I want to make it very clear that we are reporting on research, not telling individuals how they should be eating or not eating. That right there, that could be super dangerous. The point is that when you read the headline, skipping breakfast is bad for your health, it's not really telling you the whole story, and it ends up just being another misleading soundbite. So what the heck is true then? The established science changes on this topic, but right now what's well accepted in nutrition and physiology journals is that your body's circadian rhythm, your natural sleeping and wake cycles, matters a lot when it comes to your eating. Your circadian rhythm prepares you to be more efficient at absorbing and digesting foods in the first half of the day, and specifically not later on in the day when most of us are currently eating the majority of our caloric intake. For most people, both breakfast and lunch fall into the first half of the day, whether you're eating at 8 a.m. or 1 p.m., and this has been shown repeatedly to be the better half of the day to focus on when it comes to filling your plate. Your late evening meals, whether you're calling them dinner or supper or whatever, are likely hitting your body at a time when it's less able to effectively absorb nutrients and is already releasing melatonin and decreasing insulin in preparation for your sleep. This chart from the Handbook of Experimental Pharmacology gives a very high-level summary of how your body is regulated by your sleep-wake cycle. It shows that during the earlier parts of the day, you have better glucose tolerance, better insulin secretion, and the ability to basically use energy efficiently to fuel you up quickly. When you're asleep, your body wants to do the maintenance activities, not process a bunch of new food that's floating around in your system. At night, your body goes through gluconeogenesis, that process that you learned about in biology where it makes new energy for the next day. It's also letting your mitochondria grow and support your cells, sending recovery nutrients to your muscles. Basically all the really important stuff that needs to happen if you want to feel like a person instead of a zombie the next day. When you don't sleep, you're missing out on all these processes, but when you eat right before going to sleep, you also disrupt a lot of these functions functions because your body has to deal with the very pressing demands of digestion. For a specific example that doesn't need a biology degree, take insulin. We're all generally aware of insulin and know it's important to regulate your blood sugar. In the back half of the day, your insulin decreases because your body expects you to be done eating. But what if you're like me and you're mainlining soda and ice cream at 2 a.m. to get through writing a script in a clearly hypothetical scenario that has never once happened ever? Well, when this happens, your body has to spike your insulin to deal with the onslaught of sugar floating around in your bloodstream. Insulin skyrockets, which leads to a huge cascade of other hormones, including the suppression of MCH, or melanin concentrating hormone, which then keeps you from falling asleep. Eating at night, instead of sending signals to your brain that you're full, can also lead to your brain producing more of the hormone orexin, the neurotransmitter that tells your brain that it's hungry. So eating at night can disrupt your ability to go to sleep and even lead to you being even hungrier in the long run, which is why a lot of people find themselves caught in a snacking chain for hours and hours deep into the evening. When then should we be eating? What is the most important meal of the day? Well, pretty clearly it should be sometime in the first half of the day based on our circadian rhythms. Problem is, after all the marketing scams and long work hours and restaurants that serve you 1,000-calorie dinners at 9 p.m., it is hard to eat the way that your body was designed to. The most important meal of the day, according to our bodies, should be taking place sometime in the sorta middle of the day, like between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. It's been called breakfast, it's been called lunch, sometimes it's even called dinner. So what you call it's entirely up to you. Though for the record, Ness the waiter was right because lunch is the meal that we eat in the middle of the day. Just saying. The problem is that these hours are expected to be prime working hours for most of us. I know for me, I have meetings during this block of time practically every day. Stopping everything that I'm doing to eat a hot, hearty meal at noon? Yeah, it's not a luxury that most people have. The reason this topic feels so confusing is that when you follow where the evidence leads, it presents a solution that's just not possible for a lot of us to execute. That said, this is one of those instances where knowledge is power. There are meal plans out there that you can try where you eat half of your daily calories at lunch and then just 20% at dinner, leaving 30% for breakfast if you're keeping track. It might be interesting to try shifting your eating around a little bit to see if it makes you feel better, sleep better, or just feel more comfortable in your own body. I know that after doing all this research for this episode, I'm gonna be trying some of these tactics too. Thanks for the tip there, Ness. I knew you looked smart. But hey, that's just a theory. A food theory. Bon appetit. Hopefully in the first half of the day.